experience for Cayman students. The Security Center is protecting your world. Learn more at security.ky.
System 1 loaded.
For the record, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings from 7:30 to 9:30, we interview the various government ministers, opposition, and Cayman Island legislators. For the record is brought to you by West Bay Pharmacy at Centennial Towers. Visit us today for fast, efficient, and professional service. Everything you need and the hours you need it at West Bay Pharmacy.
Tune in every Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. for Radio Cayman's Midday Newscast. Radio Cayman, the People's Station, your trusted official source for the latest news. The 12 p.m. news is proudly brought to you by Health City Cayman Islands. World-class healthcare within your reach.
It always seems impossible until it's done, said Nelson Mandela. Join me, Rashana Hides, your reigning Miss World Cayman, as I pass on my crown to the new queen who will represent Cayman at the next Miss World pageant. Join us on Saturday, the 24th of September for a night of celebration and competition at the Hartwell Theatre for the annual Miss World Cayman pageant. Cocktails at 6 p.m. with a 7 p.m. start. Tickets are available on ticketsplus.ky. Join us as we crown our new Miss World Cayman.
For the record. For information that matters to you, the people. Hear from the government, the opposition, independents, and other experts on issues and solutions that affect you. For the record. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, tune into 89.9 and 93.9 FM for Cayman's Straight Talk Morning Show. For the record.
I invite you to join me for the record. You are invited to be a part of this interesting and informative show. Embrace the opportunity to dialogue with your legislators, policymakers, and those charged with policy implementation.
For the record.
Brought to you by
Coca-Cola. Available across the Cayman Islands from Tortuga Distributors.
Accept no substitutes. Taste the feeling with Coca-Cola.
Please be reminded that the Department of Agriculture has implemented an alternative payment method. All your livestock, farm, and home garden products can be paid using your credit or debit card. Their sales warehouse is open Monday to Friday, 8:15 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and on Saturday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. For more information, call 947-3090 or email ciagriculture@gov.ky.
89.9 Radio Cayman helps you to weather the storm during this hurricane season.
One of the most crucial elements of hurricane preparedness is storm awareness. During the season, it is of utmost importance to pay attention to the latest local weather forecast, as hurricanes do not suddenly form or strike. There are various methods of advanced notification. Utilizing such may be the difference between a favorable outcome and disaster. Both television and radio serve as excellent mediums with up-to-the-minute storm path information in the wake of a hurricane. Another method of tracking a hurricane may be only arm's length away. Your smartphone or tablet can be your most valuable tool before, during, and after a storm, providing countless numbers of apps with crucial hurricane information. Many apps allow you to track storms with moving radar and satellite imagery, plus offer alerts, current conditions, forecasts, advisories, and even video.
This hurricane preparedness tip was brought to you by your community radio station, Radio Cayman, 89.9 FM.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Cayman special reflection on the life of Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Of course, today is a day of sadness, and at the same time, it is a day of joyous celebration of the life of Her Late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. On this segment of the show, we will have in the studio, or I have in the studio with me, Mr. Loxley Banks, who at the time of the Queen's visit to the Cayman Islands was the director of Radio Cayman, also in the studio with us, Dr. Steve McField, who had the privilege and opportunity to meet Her Late Majesty. We also expect to hear from Mr. Norman Bodden, hopefully. We will also have Captain Eugene Ebanks in the studio with us. And of course, he has the distinction of being the captain of the vessel that took her across to the North Sound on her visit in 1983 to the Cayman Islands as well. But before we go to our guests in the studio, we do have a message from Governor Martin Roper and also from Premier, the Honorable G. Wayne Patton, who are both in the United Kingdom for Her Majesty's funeral. So I'm going to throw it back to the control room so that they can share both of those messages with us.
It's been quite a beautiful morning, a beautiful service, and it really does feel like a moment in the history of the UK and the overseas territories and the realms. But it was a truly inspiring service to say farewell to Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth, a really wonderful woman and monarch who has given so much over 7 decades, and one of the most inspiring leaders and servants of her people that the world has ever seen. It's been a really touching, poignant and moving morning.
I want to start off by saying what an incredible honour and privilege it has been for me as Premier to be able to represent the people and residents of our wonderful Cayman Islands at an event such as this, an event which is a reflection of the incredible service and our love and our gratitude for the leadership that Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II provided. Being in the cathedral and being a part of the funeral services was difficult. It's really difficult to put in words how amazing, how somewhat surreal it was. But you clearly felt that this was a moment in history, a moment in time that was incredibly significant. And it was just incredible that we have the privilege to be a part of it and to be there amongst all of these world leaders. And I also want to say thank you to the UK for the fact that they recognized and they really treated us to great respect, gave us excellent seatings, and you really felt that we were fully, truly a part of the British family. She was our queen. We loved her as well, and you could not help but recognize her humanity and love her for the human being that she was and everything that she brought to the service of humanity, in addition to the service of her country, the wider Commonwealth, and the rest of the world. It was truly, truly touching. It is something that I will never ever forget. I will take it for the rest of my life as one of the great privileges of being able to attend something like this. Obviously, we would never, if we had a choice, we would never want to lose her, but this is life. We now have King Charles III as our new sovereign, and he in her and his cherished mother has had an incredible example of how to do the job and how to wield that kind of soft power, that kind of diplomacy that she did, and with such great humility. And it was just truly, truly a special, special occasion.
Good morning and welcome back to Radio Cayman's special, a reflection of the life of Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And there we heard messages from His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Martin Roper, and from our Premier, the Honorable G. Wayne Patton as well. So folks, like I said earlier, it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me Dr. C. McField, who had the privilege of meeting Her Majesty, and also Mr. Loxley Banks. And Mr. Banks, of course, was the director of Radio Cayman. Now, we know that Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth II, visited the Cayman Islands on 2 occasions, 16th of February, 1983, and from the 26th to the 27th of February, 1994. Mr. Banks, Radio Cayman played an integral part in the preparations and the welcoming and broadcasting to the people of the Cayman Islands on Her Majesty's visit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, looking back in 1983, and when the planning started for this, when they were aware that the Queen was going to visit here, Radio Cayman, of course, was in on the groundwork of the planning.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Mr. Foster at the time was the Chief Secretary.
Mm-hmm. Dennis Foster.
He said to me, "Bossy, how are we going to handle this?" I said, "Well, if you give me more money, we can handle it," which meant I had to get a few more pieces of equipment.
Uh-huh.
He said, "Okay." And, we devised a plan to where we covered her for her visit from the moment that she stepped off the Viscount, because you remember she came here on the Viscount,
mm-hmm.
at the airport to when she departed back from the airport because she came here on the first visit by aircraft and departed by aircraft.
Right.
Dorian Miller was on the roof of the old airport structure. In fact, when I spoke with the director of civil aviation or whatever it was called at that time,
Mr. Ellis?
No, Hislop had taken over.
Oh, he had taken. Sheldon had taken over.
Sheldon said, "Boy, I don't know if that roof will support you." I said, "What we'll do, we'll get a couple of sheets of plywood and throw up on there," and that's what we did, and fix some kind of thing that Dorian was fairly comfortable because she landed here in the middle of the morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was pretty darn hot up there.
Okay, tell us about some of the staff members at Radio Cayman at that time. Give us some of the names for a little nostalgia.
Well, some of them, one of the main ones. Well, they all played a very important role. But Lomax Rankin, Lomax, and I think Avery was still helping us here. May not have been on staff because he was only here for a short time.
Avery Eaton.
Yeah, Tessa Bodden was here.
Okay.
Tessa and Shirley Banks, and probably she's listening this morning. I think she was on the outside because we covered, like I say, every stop that she made. Joy Brandon of blessed memory, we had her up on the roof of the Thompson building because the traffic around that section was a little bit different than what it was today. So when Doran turned the coverage loose from the airport, Joy picked it up. We had somebody down at Mearns, which she's kind of slowed down. She didn't stop. And then I think her next stop was Government House. We had somebody there, and then she went all around West Bay. And as you mentioned, she came through all of West Bay. We had about 5 different stops in West Bay. And the last one in West Bay was on the roof of what's now Calypso Grill. And that's where she got on to Captain Eugene's boat and went across to the Kaibo, what we call a Kaibo at the time. And the Kaibo was just a little, we call it Bagadair, a couple of tall trees. And in fact, when Lomax and I first went out there to see how we were going to handle this, I said, Lo, you're going to have to get up in that tree. Because we had to take...
And Lomax was a pretty tall person himself.
Yeah,
He's a pretty tall person himself.
But we had to take what we call a whip antenna and lash it on to one of the tall limbs in the tree in order to get across, because the technology was not the way it is today. And, and we covered her from there, and then she went to the Queen, the opening of through Old Man Bay, and then up to the opening of the highway, and then she went north through East End and came back round. And then that evening they had the big to-do, the big reception at the Government House, And I don't know if you remember, it rained like, about the end of the when she just about made the circle and it started to rain. I mean, it really came down, And I got to meet her there, and of course we seen her off at the airport. And but everybody, and at some of the stops, she did get out and speak to a few people. Yeah. And we recorded all of that. We had it recorded on our what's called, our logger, and I'm not sure that during Ivan it didn't get,
Okay. We're going to hear from Dr. Steve McField. Captain Eugene is going to join us as well. Paul, I'm going to come to you for a commercial break. When we return, the conversation with Mr. Loxley Banks, Dr. Steve McField, and joining us in the studio, Captain Eugene Ebanks. Please stay tuned. Radio Cayman will be back shortly.
89.9 Radio Cayman helps you to weather the storm during this hurricane season.
One of the most crucial elements of hurricane preparedness is storm awareness. During the season, it is of utmost importance to pay attention to the latest local weather forecast, as hurricanes do not suddenly form or strike. There are various methods of advanced notification. Utilizing such may be the difference between a favorable outcome and disaster. Both television and radio serve as excellent mediums with up-to-the-minute storm path information in the wake of a hurricane. Another method of tracking a hurricane may be only arm's length away. Your smartphone or tablet can be your most valuable tool before, during, and after a storm, providing countless numbers of apps with crucial hurricane information. Many apps allow you to track storms with moving radar and satellite imagery, plus offer alerts, current conditions, forecasts, advisories, and even video.
This hurricane preparedness tip was brought to you by your community radio station, Radio Cayman, 89.9 FM.
The hurricane season is not over yet. It's important to stay vigilant. Check your emergency kit and make sure you fully stock it with critical items such as a 5-day supply of water. That's 1 gallon of water per person per day. Stock extra water for persons with special needs such as nursing mothers, children, and people with illnesses. And don't forget to stock water for your pets. For more useful hurricane preparedness tips, visit the Water Authority's website at www.waterauthority.ky or follow us on social media.
Good morning. Sorry, my folks. We're having two conversations here. Good morning and welcome back to Radio Cayman Special. It's a reflection on the life of Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Our focus really is on what occurred during her 2 visits here in the Cayman Islands. In the studio to share those little nuggets with you, we have Mr. Loxley Banks, who was a director at Radio Cayman at the time of the Queen's visit. Dr. Steve McField, who, you'll hear what his occupation was and what the Queen had to say about that as well. And Captain Eugene Ebanks, who, in our tradition as seafarers, played a pivotal role in the transportation of the late Queen Elizabeth II as well. So, Doc, tell us about your encounter with the Queen.
Well, I was not here. I was here when the Queen came on her first visit in 1983, but I left at the same time. I think I left that early that morning before she came in. I had a business engagement. I was working for the U.S. government at the time, doing letters of request.
Okay.
And I had to go up to Washington, D.C., and I missed that occasion. But on the second occasion, 1994, I was invited at Government House to meet the Queen and Prince Philip. I was in a line, like many other hundreds of people waiting, and we know there was a rope enclosure, and she was walking around the rope enclosure to meet different people. And I was standing by a gentleman. I think he was a European man. I didn't know who the gentleman was. And we saw the Queen away from us, going, speaking to the people on the other side. And we said, well, we're not going to be able to get to speak to her. And then she turned and she saw us. And she came darted right across the enclosure there to where we were standing. And she said to this gentleman, and in those days we didn't have COVID, so we had a lot of people packed in. Yes, we had a lot of people packed into a small space. And she says to him, and what do you do on the island? And he says, madam, I am an accountant. And she says to me, are you an accountant too? And I said, no, ma'am, I'm a lawyer. And she said, you're all the same. She said, you're all the same. And then she went off. And she was speaking then to Har McCoy.
Okay.
He was in a wheelchair, and her husband. And she left him, Prince Philip, speaking to Har McCoy, and left. And I could hear the conversation between Prince Philip and Har McCoy. They were talking about something with some regiment, the same regiment they were belonged to, or something like in the Navy. And then I was wondering, why is he spending so much time with Har McCoy? And later on, I discovered that Har McCoy was one of the most decorated men in the Commonwealth from Cayman, and Prince Philip knew him personally.
Okay, Captain Eugene, welcome. You had the good fortune of transporting the Queen across the North Sound. Now, I think Mr. Banks and I last week we were talking about this, and whether or not your boat and you were originally the ones who were originally intended, or whether or not plans had to change. Tell us about that first.
Okay. Okay. See, thanks for giving me the opportunity. And I've had the good fortune of meeting Her Late Majesty on 3 occasions.
Wow. Okay.
The first was when she came to Cayman on February the 16th, 1983. And I was contacted by the governor's office. It was Governor Peter Lloyd at the time. And he said that my name had been put forward to escort the Queen across the North Sound and do as much of a tour as possible. Of course, that day, unfortunately, was a very rough day in the North Sound. The original plan was that they would use another boat, but the other boat was drawing too much water to get into the North Sound. And that was when we cut the first channel going into Morgan's Harbor. We finished that in December 1982 with the help of Dr. Jiggly of blessed memory. He afforded us the 2 Caterpillar excavators from MRCU to be able to dig the channel. And anyway, I said sure I would be honored to do that. And Hayward Smith was my mate at the time, and then we talked about the protocol and some security issues, and so I engaged Mr. Jack Puya, who started one of the first security companies in Cayman, and Louis Cito Hydes, because he was MRCU and he was very familiar, and my father, Captain Marvin. I think those were the 5 as the crew, and then.
Was there any particular vetting, any background checks, or
yes,
the crew members and stuff?
You
had to deal with her security.
I was getting to that, yeah. But the day before, the trip, there was some security came down and they checked the boat in and out. And then the morning of the trip, they had some divers go underneath the boat.
Wow! All
the other boats had to come out of the marina. And then we had the police boat was the escort, and it was so rough that it would have been really uncomfortable going straight across from Morgan's Harbor to Cayman Kai or Kaibo, so we had to go heading up to into the sea up to Harbor House and then come across the duck pond and go that route because it was the smoothest route possible, and there was catering on the board, and you couldn't have the boat rolling too much, and so we made that trip very successfully, and I never forget Mr. Craddock. He was the representative for Northside at the time, and he was there to meet us, and on the way across, His Highness, Prince Philip, he came up on the top and he said, just want to check out the navigation equipment. That was the day before satellites, GPS.
GPS,
right?
yes.
So he was very interested in that. He's very down to earth, very accommodating, very sociable person. And so I said, and he asked about fishing. I said, well, this is really good marlin fishing. So you have the giant marlin? I said, no, we don't have the grandest here, but we have a lot in the 150 to 250 pound. I said, it's really good. And I said, if you have the time, I'd be happy to take you out for a day. He said, I'd love to, but my schedule won't allow it. So we made that trip across, and Mr. Craddock was there, and I think he spoke to Dr. Giglioli, if I remember correctly. And he said he was happy to come across so smoothly. And Mr. Craddock said to him, well, don't forget you have one of the best. He said his father, Captain Marvin, he was taught by one of the best. That's what it was. So I said, well, I can't argue with that. Anyway, it was quite an interesting trip. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see them on their second visit in '94. I was off island. And then again, after I was elected in 2000 and invited to Buckingham Palace in 2002 for the Golden Jubilee. And during the introduction of all the delegates from different countries, I said, Your Highness, I'm sure you don't remember me, but I was captain of your launch while you were in Cayman. He said, I remember you. You wanted to take me blue water fishing. So I was shocked. 19 years and the thousands of people that he would meet in that time, and he still, he had a sharp memory. Then again, I went back to London in 2009, I think it was, 8 or 9. And it was a parliamentary conference, and we were invited again to Buckingham Palace. There we had a much longer conversation. He was interested in what I did before, and talking about his visit to Cayman, how much he enjoyed it, and he would be happy to come back any opportunity. So, and he said, well, why do they call you captain? I said, well, I was a pilot with Cayman Airways, and I'm licensed by the U.S. Coast Guard as well. And he said, you went to the U.S. Merchant Marines for 5 years, and I had 3 stints in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And I said, I accumulated quite a bit of sea time, and so I'm licensed for the sea and for the air. He says, quite interesting. So we talked a good conversation that time, and I must say I was really impressed with how down to earth he was, and how he could relate to because of his time in the military too. So it was quite interesting. I really enjoyed it. 3 occasions.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to throw this one out there. We keep hearing about Her Late Majesty, the Queen, and her memory, the knack of remembering people, recalling them. Now, if any of you are familiar with the protocols, I guess if there's a small gathering, you would normally get background information. If you know who the guests are in advance, you get some background information, on them, and that, may jolt your memory. or do they actually practice this whole idea of remembering people? You know, we have a tendency to say, oh, I believe I know you from somewhere or something like that, but they, you know, can hit it right on the head. Doc, any views on that?
I don't know about that, but I remember when I was going to law school in Barbados, I met a gentleman who lived up on Cape Hill, and I discovered that he worked for the U.S. Embassy.
Mm-hmm.
And his name, can't remember his last name, but his name was George. And his wife was telling me that sometimes he goes all over, leave Barbados sometimes for 6 months, and she doesn't know where he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I put two and two together, and you know, but he was telling me, he says to me, I know every leader in the Caribbean. And I says, well, he'll say, to get the job, you have to read a biography of all the leaders. And then to pass the test, they put that up on the screen. And then you have to say, this is so-and-so and so and blah, blah. This is aliases. These are the people who he hang out with. These are the kind of cigarette he smokes. This is his mistress. And so forth. So I don't know if the briefing in the royal family or is the same. They are briefed before they come. And you know as well as I know that there's a report that goes up every month to the Foreign Commonwealth Office about everything that happens in Cayman and about everybody. And so I believe that when the people are going there to meet them, they are already briefed who they are, what their nuances are, and so forth, and they know before they get there.
Okay, we have been joined on the phone by Mr. Norman Bodden, former member for Legislative Assembly, former member of Executive Council as well, and I believe he has received one of the Queen's honors, but I'll let him tell us about that. I'll just preface his introduction by saying that Mr. Norman Bodden was part of the Cayman delegation in 1966 that traveled to Jamaica to meet Her Late Majesty, the Queen, in Jamaica. Mr. Bodden, good morning. Welcome to Radio Cayman.
Good morning, O.C., and my regards to your distinguished panel, and I thank you and your team at Radio Cayman for putting such an experienced panel together in remembering Our Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Thank you very much, sir. Tell us about your encounter or encounters with Her Late Majesty.
Well, my first meeting with Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II was in 1966, when Her Majesty and the Duke were on a Caribbean tour. Our then administrator, John Cumber, and other government officials were disappointed that the Cayman Islands were not included in her itinerary. And so the powers that be put together a delegation of 10 couples, as I remember it, to travel to Kingston and to be presented to Her Majesty and the Duke at their visit. As I recall, it was the District Commissioner, Dennis Foster, and Reba, his wife, Arthur Hunter and Karen Hunter, Helen and Edwin Marion, Eldad and Patricia Cornell, Burns and Celia Ruddy.
Yep.
And those are all I can remember. Virginia myself.
I think Mr. Timmer Adam was there, Mr. J. Bodden, Mr. and Mrs. J. Bodden as well.
Right. I couldn't remember everyone, but others that are listening, I'm sure, will remember others that were included.
Right.
But before we left here, the ladies were briefed on how to curtsy, and the men were briefed on how to bow and not to extend their hand to shake Her Majesty's hand unless she extended hers. And even at that, it was to be a very light handshake, because we explained that the large number of people that Her Majesty shakes hands with, it has to be very light because it could become very tiring. But we were all very excited. I think it was at King's House, but if I remember correctly, but I might not be 100% on that. But I remember the excitement in the room, the tenseness, and the excitement of meeting Her Majesty. But as we were lined up and as we waited for her arrival, immediately as the introductions were started, we all felt exactly relaxed and at home. And one thing I remember about her was she had the most vivid blue eyes I have ever seen, and she was certainly a fine lady. I think that she was born to be a queen, and she ruled with dignity and decorum.
Mm-hmm.
And in 70 years, she never missed a step.
Yeah.
We loved her and respect her like millions around the world, and she will certainly be missed.
Mr. Bodden, did you have an opportunity also to go to the National Stadium? I think that there was an event that was held at the National Stadium as well during that visit?
Yes, we went there as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, at some point in time, was a special period or segment set out for them to exclusively meet the Cayman delegation?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I think it was just a general meeting and very brief, and she spoke to some of the other members of the delegation, but she just smiled and spoke to Virginia and myself, and I think she may have asked some of the other members of the delegation about Cayman.
Mm-hmm. What about her visits to Cayman? Did you have the opportunity to meet her here?
Virginia and I met her in 1983 when I was a member of the Legislative Assembly as a backbencher. And I always remember her in one of the committee rooms looking across to the Tower building. That was that square glass building that I think has been demolished now. But she looked through the window at the building and she asked, she says, "What is that ghastly building?" I think she was referring to the architectural style because it really looked like a big glass box. And I think both her and her son had an eye for architecture.
Okay. Anything else that you want to add, Mr. Bodden? Anything?
Not really.
Did you have an opportunity to watch any of the ceremonies in London today? And what are your thoughts on those if you did?
I listened to it on Radio Cayman while I was waiting on your panel to come on. And I would just like to say that those two occasions that we were able to meet Her Majesty, Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, were the highlights of our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And we were certainly privileged to be included in the delegation. And I'm eternally grateful that we had that opportunity to meet her.
Mr. Bodden, I want to thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with our Radio Cayman audience, people of the Cayman Islands, and I'm sure that is going beyond our shows as well. Thank you very much, sir. You have a great day, and may God bless you.
Thank you very much, O.C., for putting the panel together. And I'm just sorry I was unable to be present with you there in the studio. But I think you did a good job and continue to do a good job for our country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Norman. And while I would love to take credit for that, our director, Ms. Norma McField, has to get all of the credit for putting all of these wonderful panelists that we have in here. So, Mr. Loxley, back to you and Radio Cayman. Certainly based on what you've told us, you didn't have the tools at your disposal that we have here today. Tell us a little bit about that as well.
As I say, technology back in those days that's from 1970 or 1983. It was not what it is today, and we had to sort of improvise a lot of things. I recall we had, in fact, we did not have an in-house maintenance capacity at that time, and one of the contract maintenance people that we had him into the tour that he was at special places, and he came by the station. It was in the afternoon, from one of his positions going to another one, and he was from UK. He was older, kind of older gentleman at the time, and he was very experienced in electronics and so forth. And the antenna that we had, according to his theory, was not going to work. And right in the lobby there, I had to say, "Man, no." I says, I quickly did a little calculation in my head, because he was talking about frequency and all this stuff. I said, "No, man." I said, "You go up there, believe you me, the frequency will get through." He went out and it worked perfect, and came back and says, "Boy, I didn't think it would." I said, but it, the technology and, George Hunter at Idle Electronics, there was no cell phones, but we had what we called radio phone.
Like a walkie-talkie?
Some similar to that, but it was on a little different kind of
frequency
base beside a walkie-talkie. And we got two from him, and we had about, I think, 5 or 6 people in all at various districts, various stops, and we had to bicycle them around. Some of them we sent Doran from the airport up to Caibo. So we had to get him up there quickly to when Captain Eugene came across with us. So it was a massive thing.
Undertaken.
Yeah. And I'll tell you the truth, that afternoon, when we completed it, I laid back in my chair in my office, put my foot up on the desk. Thank you, because everything went quite well.
Excellent. Cap, I think you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed when I was speaking earlier that at the time Mr. Benson, blessed memory, and Mr. Garston Smith were the representatives for West Bay. And they were very much involved in escorting Her Late Majesty to the boat and arranging for all the crowds and the flag waving, and it was quite a memorable day. And we have lots of pictures. Even now, even after Hurricane Ivan took a lot of them, we still have a lot of beautiful pictures of the occasion.
Okay. And what was this? Would you say the size of her entourage that was on board your vessel?
Okay, we had to take off some of the furniture off because we needed more room in the salon to accommodate them. It was probably between the crew and her entourage, it was probably a dozen people.
Okay.
It was about a dozen. And he had our own chefs on board and our own security, of course. And then we had, of course, the police escort as well. And all of them, all of her entourage were very accommodating, very interesting. Spoke freely, and they were mostly concerned about her safety, which is top priority. But yes, it was a great experience.
Now, sometimes, Doc, it is not unusual for the private secretary, of the Queen or someone in that near to that capacity to write back and to thank those persons involved. Did any of you receive anything in writing from the Queen or even from the governor at the time?
I did get a letter of appreciation and thanks from Governor Lloyd. I did get that. I did. Yes.
So, Doc, let's talk a little bit about Her Majesty itself, and we keep hearing the historical pundits, the commentators talking about the stability that she brought to the throne. And so, Paul, we're going to have Doc talk a little bit about this, and then we want her to share with our listeners the cut that Mr. Banks shared with us in terms of her ascension to the throne, the passing of her late father, and everything as well. But Doc, the stability. Talk about the stability.
Well, all you have to do is listen to what some of the great leaders of the world have said about her, and especially those in the Commonwealth. She was a great calming force. Amongst all the turmoil.
Right.
Remember now how she became queen. Remember how she became queen?
Yes.
Her uncle, Edward VIII, abdicated the throne because he was forbidden to keep the throne if he got married to Mrs. Simpson.
Wallace Simpson.
Wallace Simpson, the
divorcee, American divorcee, yes,
from Philadelphia. He insisted that he could not reign without her by his side, and so lo and behold, he abdicated. Now the next one in line was the Queen's father, George VI. He became queen, and historically it has been said that he never actually wanted to be king because he was not trained in the line of succession to be king. And then he didn't last very long on his reign. He died, and then Elizabeth, his daughter, became queen.
Yes, yeah.
And it was then that she brought the common force in not only in the Commonwealth but in her own family. And it's incredible when you read her history to see how she could have reigned for 70 years, the longest reigning sovereign, even longer than her great aunt, in which she took the name from, Elizabeth I. It's when I look back at it, I remember when the coronation. I was young. I listened to the coronation published, broadcasted on the radio. We couldn't get it. On our radio because it was all the static. It was being broadcasted by Radio Jamaica, and then we heard that it's being played on the Monarchy, the Marine's ship.
Yeah,
it was in the harbor, and our uncle Neville Ebanks was the cook on it, and we went down there, and they were broadcasting it on the Monarchy on the Monarchy's loudspeaker, and a lot of people were on the dock listening to it, and we stayed there the whole day, and like nobody was moving. When they were talking about how she's coming up now with the Abbey and they're placing a crown on her head, and we were all young and we were just sitting there, and that's a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, we're going to share some of that now with our audience as well. Paul, let's play that.
And now, an excerpt from King Edward VIII's abdication speech in 1936.
Believe me when I tell you that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love.
And now, as heard during World War II.
And from a bombed building in a burned-out city, where the bombers came at dusk and departed at dawn, came the voices of two princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret Rose, sending greetings to evacuated children.
My sister is by my side, and we are both going to say good night to you. Come on, Margaret. Good night, children. Good night, and good luck to you all.
1947 was the year in which most of us felt 10 years older. We remembered Elizabeth as a child of 11 at the time of her father's coronation. When we looked again, she was 21 and a full-grown princess at Westminster.
Take thee, Elizabeth Alexander Mary.
Take thee, Elizabeth Alexander Mary.
To my wedded wife.
To my wedded wife.
to have and to hold, from this day forward.
Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh.
Take thee, Philip,
Take me, Philip,
to my wedded husband,
to my wedded husband,
to have and to hold,
to have and to hold,
from this day forward.
from this day forward.
The royal wedding was a rare moment of relaxation in a dull, drab, austere England. But the crown the future queen would wear had lost its brightest jewel, and India had lost its father.
Okay, Mr. Loxley, I want to thank you for digging that up and sharing that with us. And at this time, I'll welcome you to give us some closing comments. And I'm made to understand that the ceremonial part of Her Majesty's coffin being lowered was either just took place or is taking place as well. And you may want to comment on our new king, King Charles III, and what his future looks like, what his reign will look like. If you can look into that crystal ball.
Boy, that's a big one. Well, I think, we'll never see another, not in our lifetime anyway, and I don't, as you look back or look forward, can't see it happening again, where you'd have a monarch on the throne for 70 years, and one that's so tightly, I think, guided the monarchy and the dependents and so forth, without really giving up any of her own, we call it biases. I don't think there's any of us without biases. Straightforward, and it was significant during some of the coverage of over the last couple of days. It says, I think when she was coronated, her first allegiance was to God, was taken at the altar at her coronation, before any allegiance to her was taken. She wanted to make her allegiance to the guidance of the God, Father above, before anybody took any allegiance to her. And I think, we've been all through her reign and what we've seen over the last 10 days, that spiritual aspect, really shone through.
And it's signified in the urn that's on her, casket as well.
Yes.
There, the part of it, that spiritual connection.
Yes. And I think, especially the young folks out there, hopefully that some of them have taken in some of what especially has transpired in the last 10, 15 days. We'll reflect on this and see that going forward, no matter where you're at, that spiritual aspect, if you've put that to one side, I think you're going to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and you can't just talk it; it has to be genuine.
It has to be genuine.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, just listening to those two different voices of her in the last cut, you could tell the sincerity in her, her voice, her approach, and all through her reign.
Yeah, Captain Eugene, final comments.
Thank you, Uzi. I can only say that it has been a tremendous experience interacting with His Royal Highness and Her Majesty, the late Queen Elizabeth II. Those are memories that will last, has lasted me, ever since 1983, and I'm sure it'll last me until I'm no longer here. But it's hard to explain how the feeling that you get by just being in their presence and speaking with them and finding that they really aren't. And most people think they're very stuck up and snobbish. They're very, very down to earth. Both of them are very down to earth. Were very down to earth people, and I thank the people of Cayman and the Governor Lloyd for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, yeah. Once in a lifetime.
Once in a lifetime, absolutely.
Not many people could say that they had such an opportunity. Doc, over to you.
It was, for me, I live to see some 4 monarchs now. I live to see her uncle, Edward VIII.
Mm-hmm.
I live to see her father, George VI.
Mm-hmm.
3 monarchs now.
Mm-hmm.
And I live to see her 70 years reign. Yeah, 4, and I'm now
Charles
III. Charles III.
Right.
King Charles III. For me, the most significant revelations to me when I met her, that she was such a small, petite person. I think, you have this image that the Queen is some, something on TV that they show you about these women, who's like commanding, the screen and stuff. She was such a petite little woman. So petite and stuff, and that surprised me, to wield so much power.
Yes,
to wield so much power
and command so much respect.
Command so much respect.
Yes,
and to see their relationship with Cayman, but her relationship with Cayman was not the only one. Her husband too, the Duke. I have here a photograph.
Yes.
This is the late.
You can hold it up a little higher so the camera can catch it.
This is the late Prince Philip.
Yeah.
And in the photograph, he's speaking to Captain Tom Diaz and Mr. Ernest Panton back in the 1960s. And Captain Tom Diaz was the captain who captained a ship that was belonged to Prince Philip, grandfather, and a guy called Lieutenant Phillips. The Lost Horizon, they took it back to England, and they had a Caymanian crew on it. And for the audience, I would like to share
very quickly, Doc, because we have another set of guests coming on, so we're on time.
I would like to share the name of the crew.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the crew was my grandfather, Lemuel Richard McField, who was the bosun. There was a guy called Lee Godfrey from Georgetown, William Rivers from West Bay, and a guy called R.F. Ebanks. And then there was a guy called Mr. Mendez, who was the cook. And I wonder if there is somewhere that we could, the protocol officer or something could sort of go back and try to find out who these men were.
But Doc, was not that vessel built in Cayman as well?
No.
It wasn't built.
No, it wasn't built here. That was a myth.
Oh,
that vessel was a 3-master schooner that they turned into one of the most beautiful yachts in the world. And they had come to Jamaica to play polo with the Jamaican regiment there.
Okay.
And the war was coming, and they wanted to leave the ship in Jamaica, but they decided to take it back to England.
Okay.
And they needed a crew because all the crew had gone back to England on passenger ship.
Okay.
And when the ship got burned up in the Bay of Biscay, Lord Mountbatten came down to Portsmouth and picked up all of these men and took them to England on a train. And they also met the royal family.
Yeah.
These Caymanians met the royal family. Yeah. So, it's good. I'm always in a place where history is made for me. I'm so lucky.
Yeah. So, quick question, Captain Eugene. The vessel, is that vessel still around? You still have ownership of that vessel?
Actually, I didn't own the vessel at the time. Okay. I was just the captain of it.
Okay.
Mr. Barrett.
So it wasn't a family.
A gentleman from Philadelphia. But I would go up every 6 months to either Fort Lauderdale or Jacksonville, bring it down here. He would bring it down here for the winter and take it back up there for the summer.
Wow.
So we had to ferry it back and forth for about 5 years, I think it was. But every 6 months I would go up there and pick it up and bring it down, then take it back up, and another crew would take it from there up to New Jersey. He kept it in New Jersey. But that vessel is no longer here.
Okay. We have been given a little reprieve, and we have a little bit more time that we will hold on until another host comes along, and the guest as well. And I read something about the trip in 1994, the Rolls Royce that was purchased for the Queen to travel in, late Queen Elizabeth, was purchased in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I think from a dealership over there, and then it was used afterwards as the governor's official vehicle. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. I really wasn't involved with it, but I know that was what transpired. And yes, after we used it for the Queen's transport here, then the then governor, I don't remember who it was in 1994, but he took it then as his personal.
You know, on the first visit OC, there was we didn't have many what you'd call luxury vehicles around here at that time, and they had to put out a call and there was 2, 4, 5 of them, for the people to say to government, you can use these for the transporting the entourage. And I think, as I remember right, Mark Panton had I'm not sure what kind of car. I think it was a Lincoln at the time, and that was one of them. And I'm not sure whether Mr. Haig, he had a
Haig, yes.
Yeah, I think one of his, and they got about 4 vehicles together, and and Rolphie was on the first visit. He was her chauffeur.
Yes.
And when Mr. Craddock of blessed memory met him, then he escorted him up to the new highway, then which she named the Queen's Highway.
Yes.
That was between east end and north side, and there's a plaque there today with that date on it.
Yeah.
Funny you mention that plaque, because last time I saw it, I thought to myself, boy, this thing isn't being maintained.
Yeah, it was in deplorable condition, but it's been cleared up and everything. Now I crossed it yesterday, twice actually, riding yesterday, and it's been clean, and we hope that they will continue to maintain it. As well. It is so important.
But there were two events that happened around 1983 and 1984. One was the Queen visit, which was organized by the Unity team at the time, and they also brought in the Concorde too.
Right.
The Concorde came too at that particular time. Yes.
That was for the first opening of the airport.
First opening of the airport.
That's correct.
So, folks, we see that in some other jurisdictions within the realm, the sort of warming of the monarchy. Do we believe that we will see another visit by a royal here in the Cayman Islands? In particular, King Charles III. We see where Bermuda has extended, unofficially, one of the former prime ministers, Sir John Swan, or premiers of Bermuda, has issued a welcome for King Charles to visit there first, to follow in his mother's footsteps. Do we think that there is a public appetite to have another royal visit here in the Cayman Islands? Any of you want to opine?
I would think, knowing how much King Charles now, sorry, liked it when he visited as Prince. I would think that he would be happy to come back, because he thoroughly enjoyed his visit while he was here. So, and the island would certainly be very receptive, in my opinion, to another royal visit.
Okay. So, folks, you have been listening to Radio Cayman's special reflection on the life of Her Late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. It has been my pleasure to have in the studio with me Dr. Steve McField, who had the pleasure of meeting Queen Elizabeth II, Mr. Loxley Banks, who was the director at Radio Cayman during the Queen's visit, and Captain Eugene Ebanks, a former member of our Parliament, who also had the opportunity and the distinction of being the captain of the vessel that took the late Queen Elizabeth II across the North Sound when she was opening what is now and what was known then was named the Queen's Highway as well. We will have a second segment of this program that will be hosted by Mr. Patrick Schmid, and he will have guests in the studio, Mr. Lemuel Hurlston, Mr. David Sheldon as well, and maybe some other call-ins also. So, folks, I want to thank you for sharing this segment with me. Please stay tuned. Radio Cayman will be back shortly.
Your Radio Cayman 6 p.m. news, Monday through Friday, is brought to you by Logic, your life connected. The 8:12 a.m. weather report, Monday through Friday, is proudly sponsored by CG Britcay. Insurance, health, pensions, life, where people come first.
This is how we wake you up in the morning. On Radio Cayman.
Are you ready? Here we go. Set. I feel like running, skip it, run it. Hey, let's skip it.
Praise time.
Give me Jesus in the morning. I will. So send me, Lord. I will go.
Weekday mornings from 6 until 6:30.
Water Authority Cayman wishes to advise its valued customers and the motoring public of planned works to upgrade the water supply infrastructure along Marina Drive between Almond Avenue and the Harbour House Marina. Preliminary work began the week of 12th September. Work will take place weekdays between 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. The project will last for approximately 12 weeks. During the course of the works, traffic management measures will be in place with signs directing the traffic flow. Motorists are encouraged to drive with caution when they are in the area to protect their safety and the safety of the Water Authority's staff. Customers in the area may experience service outages throughout the work. The authority will make every effort to give advanced notice related to outages. Customers can visit our website www.waterauthority.ky for outage notices. The Water Authority appreciates the patience and understanding of its customers and the public as it undertakes these works and apologizes for any inconvenience this may cause.
Did you know that in the event of a hurricane, water designated for the purposes of drinking, cooking, and bathing must be disinfected before use? Water may be disinfected either by boiling or through the use of chlorine bleach. To disinfect through boiling, simply leave the water on the fire for 1 minute after it begins to boil. To disinfect with bleach, add 3 ounces of chlorine bleach to every 1,000 gallons of water. If you are not able to smell the bleach in the water after 30 minutes, then add half of the amount of bleach that was added during the initial application. Recheck the water after 15 minutes to ensure that there is a residual bleach smell. A residual bleach smell is an indicator that the water has been properly disinfected. For more post-hurricane safety tips, visit DEH website at deh.gov.ky.
Radio Cayman News.
The country has entered a period of national mourning.
It is with great sadness and sorrow that we learn of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Her loss will be keenly felt.
I remember when she came and visited, the excitement that brought.
I'm in London right now and everyone around me has been talking about it.
Taking her place on the throne is her son, King Charles. God save the King.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice for today's biggest news.
Good afternoon and welcome to the listening audience here at Radio Cayman. It is a distinct honor for me to be present with two fine gentlemen who are going to share a bit about their recollections in relation to, or certainly their recollections as well as their experiences in relation to Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who we are remembering today, the day of her funeral. Both in fact that we are very proud that she has been our reigning monarch for 70 years, as well as the fact that we are mourning together with her family her loss. But without further ado, I would like to welcome to the panel the Honourable Lemuel Hurlston, CVO, MBE, JP, Doctoris Honoris Causa, if I said that correctly, sir?
That's correct.
Okay, sir. Welcome.
Thank you.
Of course, Mr. Hurlston was Chief Secretary of these islands for quite a substantial period of time, and during some significant years between the two visits of Her Majesty the Queen. And I also have the pleasure of having with us today Regimental Sergeant Major, WO1, Mr. David Shelton. Welcome, Mr. Shelton.
Thank you.
Who is with the Cayman Islands Regiment, of course, and he can share with us a great deal, I suspect, about the logistics involved in planning this type of event. So we look forward to the discussion with you today. And as I mentioned previously, we are continuing the segments that have been planned for today in commemoration of this incredibly lifetime, once-in-a-lifetime event that is both sad and at the same time it's celebratory in that we are marking 70 years of the reign of Her Majesty, Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So, Mr. Hurlston, I was wondering if we could start with you, sir.
Sure.
Would you be able to share with us a little bit, perhaps, about your experiences after, I think, 26 years in the civil service, and the interaction that you may have had with Her Majesty the Queen, for example, during her, I would gather, her second visit more so than her first visit?
Correct.
Yes, sir?
That is correct. Yeah, during her first visit in 83, I was a middle manager in the civil service. I was a principal secretary. Right. I believe that is now called chief officer in the hierarchy. And on that occasion, my wife and I served as marshals at the reception that was held at Government House. And on that occasion, Her Majesty and Prince Philip came out of Government House, entrance, front door. Her Majesty came down the south side of the walkway, and Prince Philip came down on the other side and greeted groups of persons that were pre-assembled. Right. And my wife and I happened to be in the group that Prince Philip walked through and walked down and had a chat with. But the most memorable thing about that evening is that it ended with pouring rain. Immediately the reception ended, the heavens opened, and we had a nice shower of rain. So the 83 visit was really not too memorable from my point of view, but the 94 visit, I was in the office of the Chief Secretary, and so the Governor and I were the major architects of the plans that were designed for that visit. Right. And the little booklets that were prepared go into some considerable detail with maps and designs and layouts of every single movement and event, right. Which just describes really how detailed these plans have to be in order for them to be successful. Absolutely. That visit went extremely well. And she arrived on Yacht Britannia, sailing in from Belize, and her visit to Cayman was the 5th stop in an 8-nation tour of the Caribbean. I believe that might have been the last time that Yacht Britannia came into the Caribbean. I think she was retired sometime shortly thereafter. But she arrived on Yacht Britannia. It was a Saturday morning, beautiful weather. And we escorted her to the Parliament building, where she read her own speech from the throne in person, followed by which she did an investiture ceremony on the steps of Parliament and invested, among others, Sir Vassal Johnson, yes, sir. And several others. a few officers of the British Empire, a few members of the British Empire, a few certificates and badge of honor. And from there, I believe she went to visit the museum, and then they had lunch, and in the afternoon she visited and opened the Ed Bush Sports Complex in West Bay. That evening she hosted a dinner on Yacht Britannia, followed by a reception on board the ship. And on Sunday morning she came back and went to a worship service at Emsley United Church. Then she visited and opened the Queen's Botanical Gardens and visited East End and Bodden Town. So she stopped at each little district as she went through, followed by lunch at Government House, after which it was a rather hurried departure back to the yacht, because as she got to the South Terminal in the harbour, again, it rained. So rain seemed to have featured at certain prominent events throughout the visit, but that did not dampen the enthusiasm or the spirit of the Caymanian people, who came out in large numbers at every public event to support Her Majesty.
Excellent. That was a very detailed and thorough recollection of Her Majesty's relatively short visit to Cayman, but nevertheless, it also shows boundless energy that she apparently had, in addition to the fact that she obviously displayed a feeling of kinship with all of her subjects, and such governed with such humility. So, did you have an opportunity to have any discussions with her, sir?
Yes, of course.
So bold as to ask about
Yes, of course. No, I was very privileged to sit beside her for dinner on the yacht on the Saturday evening.
Yes, sir.
I sat beside her for lunch at Government House on Sunday before she left. Like everything else, when you have that opportunity and the privilege of a private conversation with Her Majesty, you generally keep the conversation private.
Yes.
But I had the privilege of having quite a number of interactions with her.
Yes.
And the Governor and I, as a result of that successful visit, the Governor and I were among those that she thanked personally, and we both received the CVO from her on that occasion.
Right.
And that is the highest award that she gives when she travels, and it is the only award that is given by her on her personal decision. No one recommends it to her. She has to decide whether you deserve it or not. And so that makes that one rather special.
Excellent, sir. So that's one that's of particular value to you then.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yes, sir. We don't want to leave you out, Regimental Sergeant Major. Forgive me if I misuse your title in any way or form, but please correct me if I do. Many of us got up this morning quite early to watch the proceedings of today, more so perhaps than any of the other events leading up to today. And we saw the immaculate precision with which everything seemed to be executed, that there didn't seem to be a single flaw in anything, at least not from my perspective. And I was so impressed by things like, without wanting to put what you might have to contribute in any particular boundaries, but I was so impressed with things like the fact that all of the participating groups that were marching were actually marching not merely in sync at all times throughout the entire process, but the fact that they were actually marching, I believe it was explained that they were doing approximately 70 paces, or exactly 70 paces per minute, to commemorate the fact that she had spent 7 decades on the throne as our monarch and sovereign. Was that something that you found? I don't know if you had an opportunity to see much of it, but was that in accordance with what you would typically expect, sir?
Yeah, it was. Anything with the military is all about precision, as you've seen and you've identified. Now, the good thing with the military is we plan and we prepare for everything. Yes. So we go through a number of phases. So we plan, we prepare for it, then we rehearse it, and then we obviously execute it, whatever it is, yeah. So that's why you'll have seen on the news various detachments in the early hours of the morning when no one's around, marching around the route, getting used to knowing where they've got to be, where they've got to stop, what they've got to do, how long it literally takes to get from one point to the next, so that they're in sync with the overall timings, because it's not just about getting from A to B. They have to be at a certain location at a certain time, otherwise the whole programme goes backwards. Right. So the lucky thing is, if you want to call it that, is the military's had a number of years to plan and prepare for Operation London Bridge. Yes. And all they've had to do is then enact that plan quite quickly. So we plan and prepare for these sort of things and parades well in advance. We also tend to not change too many things on a parade. Right. So you'll find similarities between previous parades. Right. But just on a special occasion, it'll change slightly for obviously depending on what it is. Right. So all of the people involved with it all understand fully what they've got to do from a military perspective, because it's all planned out in conjunction with individuals with similar rank to myself in the UK. Right. And then they obviously liaise with all the military units and also all of the other services, uniformed services, sort of police and so on and so forth. But if you imagine an operation like this, it's split into a number of different phases, because obviously you've got the contingents that are doing the marching, you've got the police contingent trying to provide the security for everything, and obviously you'll have heard on the news this is the largest security operation in recent history. Yes. For the police, and they've had to drag people in from all over the UK. Yes. Just to carry out a security operation and policing that. And they basically leave the parade side of it to the military, because that's what we're good at. We're good at planning and preparing for these things. Right. And then ultimately we rehearse them as well.
Right. Excellent, sir. And I mean, obviously in addition to the obvious potential risk that one has to prepare for in situations like this, in circumstances, or rather in positions such as yours, one would think that the added factor of having representatives of senior government members from all over the world would add some additional complications to that, perhaps, but nevertheless a contingency that you would have planned for, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously that side of it will be heavily biased towards the police operational side, because they'll make sure the diplomatic security for all of the dignitaries and the VIP locations are all swept and cleared. As you'll have seen on the news, it was predominantly police that were going around checking all the lampposts, putting security tags on them once they checked them, and so on and so forth. The military side of it, we would then support the police in that side of it. So you'll have noticed lining along the route, there was not just people in military uniforms similar to myself, but there was a number of people in MTP, which is our operational type uniform. So they're there supporting the police in other types of roles as well. Yes. But the main security operation will have been done with the police in conjunction with the senior military officials on site, in case they needed extra resource to be able to deploy at short notice, for argument's sake.
Right, sir. And can I just ask you about the protocol aspects of things? Again, I assume that this would be, and forgive my ignorance on the point, but I assume that the protocols, such as, for example, the various standards being used at various points throughout the ceremony and so on, is something that is part and parcel of what is nevertheless rehearsed by the military, albeit not necessarily something which comes from the military. Is that correct?
Yeah. If you look at any sort of parade going back in history, quite a lot of them were designed and created by the military in one form or another, and then a number of uniformed services have adopted the same sort of strategies and formations that we do. So from a military perspective, a lot of what we do it on a daily basis. This side of it was at a lot larger scale, so that in itself brings in the logistics of having to bring a number of people from different locations. Because if you look at this particular parade, I would suggest over the last sort of 3 or 4 days there's been over 6,000 military personnel alone doing one thing or another. And actually today on parade there were in excess of 4,800 individuals doing different parts of that right. Now, whether that be lining the streets or whether that be, the actual coffin bearers or the honour guards and so on and so forth. The good thing and the uniqueness is we are able to practice a lot of the drills that we would already carry out individually, so that when we come together and then we rehearse as a group, it seems seamless and you don't notice the difference, because it's not effective to be able to get 2,000 people any one time marching down the streets of London. Yes. So they will go away and do separate parades, if you want to call it that, their own element section of it. And then when we all come together, we all know exactly what we've got to do when we've got to do it, because we've rehearsed it, we've planned it, we've prepared it. So even before we get on the street, we've been going around doing that type of exercise back in the barracks on the drill squares and so on and so forth, or in locations that are big enough to be able to, accommodate the individuals that are doing it.
Right.
So that once we get the groups together, it seems seamless for us, because we all used to marching the same way, the same pace, the same commands. It works extremely well.
So indeed, even the leadership of the respective commands, so to speak, would have discussed this many times, as well as all the contingencies prior to today's event.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, this didn't just created over the last couple of weeks. Actually, Operation London Bridge has been there for many years. I mean, if you go back, the Queen's Coffin, they actually procured the Queen's Coffin over 30 years ago.
Yes.
So it gives you an idea how much in advance they start planning for things, because ultimately we don't know what's going to happen the day after, for argument's sake. So you have to have a plan prepared, ready to be able to rehearse it and then execute it when you need to. So from a military perspective, they'd already rehearsed this numerous times.
And sir, one final question for you for now. Many people have commented, obviously, on the outstanding performance of everyone involved, not just in today's functions, but particularly in the functions and in the parade and in the lead up to the actual funeral itself. And I just wonder, many of the comments around the concept that this is something that the British do best. Do you think there's any legitimacy in that particular claim? I know you're a little bit biased, perhaps, but
I mean, probably, because we've been doing it for hundreds of years.
Yes,
we've been doing these sort of parades for since the military was formations.
Right.
If you go way back into hundreds of years ago, a lot of the formations or drill sort of movements we do now were formations that were formed on the battlefronts and stuff. Yeah. So they still moved around in a formation to do what they had to do during battle. Yes. And the drilling side of it and the parade side of it just literally came off the back of that, but become obviously more rehearsed and more exaggerated, more flamboyant, shall we say.
Yes. And even befitting the TV. Mr. Hurlston, if I may, I believe I actually was away at university at the time, unfortunately, but I believe on Her Majesty's second visit, she arrived with her arm in a sling, did she not?
Yes, she did.
Okay, and what had happened there, sir?
She told several people that she fell from her horse and injured her wrist, and her doctors put it in a bit of a sling just to protect it during that visit. But it did not slow her down. It did not interfere in any way with her performance or her discharge of her duties, which she takes very seriously.
Yes. Indeed, this morning on the broadcast from Radio Cayman, one of the first things that seemed to be featured quite frequently was the fact that she took a vow even prior to becoming our sovereign, whilst her father was still on the throne, that she would dedicate her life to public service and to her people and to her realm, so to speak. And so it is quite amazing to see that 70 years down the line, she has impeccably adhered to that vow without any with virtually no way in which anyone could possibly criticize anything that she has done.
Several people have said, that Her Majesty never ever put a foot wrong.
Right.
And it's only because she was so dedicated to her duties and responsibilities that she dare not.
Yes.
And she, of course, wanted to set the right example for her family, for her country, and for her people.
Yes.
And that takes a lot of discipline.
Yes.
As obviously.
And self-sacrifice.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, sir. And would you agree that another important factor in that was prevalent in her reign, I suspect, is the fact that she, whilst retaining the value of tradition, she was able to be amazingly adaptable and, changing with technology and everything else that we've experienced over the last 70 years.
Oh, yes. She was very much a modern thinker and was never intimidated by technology.
Right.
She had her own iPad and iPod and all the gadgets.
Okay.
And
we won't say who makes them.
What she what she didn't know, she learned very quickly.
Yes, sir.
She's very adaptable.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think this might be a good opportunity for me just to remind our listening audience, as we are already at 11:30. This segment, as with the previous segment, is just an hour. So you should take the opportunity if you wish to have any clarification or wish to ask any questions of the gentlemen that are with me here in the studio this afternoon, and I've made time to be available for you, to please call in. Just by way of reminder, the number is 949-8037 or toll free 1-800-534-8255. You can also WhatsApp us on 925-3261 or email talktoday@cndw.ky. I think that we have a short... We're not going to break? Okay, excellent. Even better. In that case, then, just a reminder that you're listening to a special radio program reflecting on the life of Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who was laid to rest, so to speak, today in the United Kingdom. Of course, the Honourable Premier and His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Martin Roper, OB, is actually there. Representing the Cayman Islands. So the people of the Cayman Islands have been represented, and I think we heard from them very briefly just a short while ago, and they were just impressed with everything that had transpired, and they felt that they were treated extremely well, have been treated extremely well, and indeed the Caymanian people have certainly been recognized by virtue of the treatment that they received. Gentlemen, I would like to open it up to you to add anything that you think may be particularly pertinent to mention at this time in respect of what you do, perhaps, and how that fits within the overall structure of what we're discussing right now. And in particular, Mr. Shelton, yourself, because I know that you are obviously I believe, second in command.
No, I'm not that lucky.
Okay. But you nevertheless, with the Command's regiment in a senior position, and so would be directly involved in a lot of the preparation that goes into these drills and so on that are so lauded by many.
Yeah, I mean, just to rephrase it, my particular role is I'm the most senior non-officer, if you want to call it that, within the regiment. So I'm not the most senior of the other ranks. Right. Even though it got the title of Warrant Officer 1, it's still the most senior without becoming a commissioned officer, shall I say. Right. Obviously, the two I see in the commanding officer are both commissioned officers. Right. In respect to myself, yeah, my role as Regimental Sergeant Major is predominantly to do with discipline, pride, and drill forms a massive part of that. Right. So any parade that the Cayman Islands Regiment takes part in, I'm heavily involved in making sure that our contingent is correct and is doing what it needs to be doing for the right time. Right. And also liaising with our colleagues in uniformed services from the RCIPS and so on and so forth. I mean, at the moment, we've been gratefully asked by Customs and Border Control to help teach their latest cohort or group of recruits that at the moment foot drill, which we're going through at the moment. So it's good that other services have come across and asked us and recognised that we're good at drill, for argument's sake, and parades and so on and so forth. But coming back to it, obviously my role in the UK would be one of the more senior roles there. You'll have seen the individuals walking around with pay sticks such as this. They've got the equivalent role to myself, and they're really there to make sure that all of the responsible units have rehearsed, practiced, prepared, are looking the part. So they're all the discipline side of it is carried out, and that all the timings are where we should be at the right time, and the next sequence of events is correct. Yes. And also we back brief because sometimes words of command are given in the heat of the moment, which are the wrong ones. Right. But we rehearse so well that everybody just knows what we should do next anyway, and we'll carry out the next movement for argument's sake. Right. But on the other side to that is part of my role in a large sort of parade like that would be liaising with a number of the other entities as well. Because as I talked about earlier on, the logistical side of it is an absolute nightmare. Yes. If you imagine trying to get 4,000 individuals from probably all over the place in the UK down, and then you've got to house them, you've got to feed them. you got the transportation side of it, and you got horses that are moving about and all sorts of stuff. So the actual logistics on the day is a massive nightmare. But for the military itself, it seems seamless for us because we plan it right down to the last detail, and then we also have, well, what happens if something happens?
Right.
And we go as far as we can work out physically. Obviously, you're not going to be able to come up with all eventualities, but because of the way we plan and prepare for it, by the time we rehearse for the what ifs as well. Yes. So what happens if this changes for whatever reason? Like I've just said, they're on words of command. What do we do next, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So in my role, it's quite a lot to do, should we say?
Yes.
Especially if I was in London,
yes.
going on what's going on there,
yes.
because you'd be looking after the best part of 600-700 people just within my own individual unit at that point.
Right.
And then you've obviously got numerous units there today. So you've got horse guards there, you've got Blues and Royals, which is we're on the horses at the moment, but their normal day is in light infantry vehicles and stuff like that. So what you've got to remember is everybody you've seen out there today, that's just part of their role. Their other role is the military side of it, and they train daily to go on operations should they be called upon.
Yes.
And and they do a lot of the public duties. I've been there as a private and done the public duties that they're doing. So I've looked after Buckingham Palace, the Changing of the Guard, Tower of London, St James's Palace, and then Windsor, and a number of others. So I can appreciate what some of the individual junior troopers or privates that are there doing. Because obviously I didn't start as an officer. I've had to work my way through.
Right.
And then that's another thing, because we have individuals that work their way through, they understand the role from the ground up. So, it's easier for us to also look at how we plan and prepare for stuff. I keep saying plan and prepare, but that's the key thing for us. Yeah. For anything that we do, as long as we plan and prepare for it, we can then work out, what we've got to do next to be able to make it what it is. Yes. So there's a lot of running around in the background, and even sometimes on the day but you just don't see any of that.
Yes. Indeed, of course, the direct implication that one thinks of is the fact that we're very fortunate to have persons such as yourself with that type of experience here in Cayman to teach that, for want of a better term, those disciplines, and to ensure that those who in this case obviously voluntarily put themselves forward for that type of service are actually prepared to the standard that one would expect in other parts of the British realm, so to speak.
Well, I must say, to start with, I'm extremely honoured to be allowed to be the Regimental Sergeant Major for the Cayman Islands. So thank you to the Cayman Islands and to the people for allowing me to have the privilege to do this role. Part of our role is succession planning. So we're trying to develop Caymanians as we go through. We can't do it overnight, but we have to be able to move people through in a short period of time, so that in the near future, so and when I say near future, it could be 5-10 years, because it's a lot of learning to be done. We will see the first Caymanian Regimental Sergeant Major, and that's what our aim is to get to that point where we can mentor individuals, that succession plans, and then rotate people out when we can do that. So there'll be a lot of mentoring going on, and there already is at the moment. There's a lot of mentoring and leadership that we're putting back in to all ranks. Obviously, some are achieving a little bit more than others, but we all contribute to the same goal, if that makes sense. And the goal is to have Caymanians at the top and all the way down through all the positions. The thing is, though, we've got to get to that position. So there's a lot of mentoring going on as we speak.
Right. And so one final thing for the moment. I'm sure that there are a number of persons in the listening audience who will be interested to know if you can say approximately what size is the Cayman Regiment at the moment.
Yeah, we're just over 100 at the moment.
Okay, excellent, sir. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Hurlston, let me not take too much of your time away from you either, because I know that you have a great deal of experience in all of these matters, in the planning and preparation, as you have described, sir, the putting together the program. I believe it was Governor Gore that you were working with. And so maybe you could enlighten us a little bit about that particular experience.
Yeah, sure. Well, we started the preparations for the royal visit in February. We started the preparations back in the summer of the year before. A reconnaissance team came out from the palace and came out and looked around at possible activities that could be successfully planned. And we took guidance from that team. We put together several draft programs with some alternatives and options. For every event, there had to be a wet weather alternative. And we put it together, submitted it, and took the feedback that we got, made some adjustments, and then finally got the final program. And it's really a question of planning and then careful rehearsal and meticulous execution after careful rehearsal.
Yes, sir.
I wrote on the occasion of Her Majesty's Diamond Jubilee. I was in London, and I wrote an article which got buried in a time capsule. It's buried on the grounds of Buckingham Palace.
Right.
And these were articles and writings and material that had been contributed by Commonwealth countries on the occasion of the Diamond Jubilee. And I wrote a little article describing something that happened during her visit to Cayman. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit of humor. After the church service at Emsley on Sunday morning, we all exited the church, and the plan that was rehearsed was that the vehicles in the convoy would start to move off at a certain time. Well, I made the mistake, having rehearsed it in a different way, I made the mistake of escorting my wife to the car that she was to be driving in, which made me late to get into the car that I was supposed to be driving in.
I drove off and left you.
And so the convoy started to move, rightly so, the convoy started to move, and I literally had to run in order to catch up with the vehicle that I was supposed to have been in. So I wrote that in a little story, and we put it into the time capsule that is buried in Buckingham Palace.
Excellent, sir. And so when will the people have the benefit of the opening of that time capsule?
I'm not sure when they plan to open it. It was done for the Diamond Jubilee,
yes,
which was 60 years, and I'm not sure when it's going to be open.
Okay, sir.
But the story that I wrote
yes,
is published in my memoirs,
yes,
which I published in 2016.
Okay,
I added the story in there.
Excellent. When His Excellency the Governor, the current Governor, was here with me very briefly last week, and he was announcing that he was departing to go with the Premier to attend the funeral service, and a few of the important events surrounding that, including one hosted by His Majesty Charles III. He was mentioning a little anecdote about when he first had an audience with the Queen at Windsor Castle, when he was coming to serve here as governor. But I don't think I have the discretion to share that. Right. I think that's his prerogative, and so I'll leave that as it is. Mm-hmm. But it was obviously indicative of again the humility that Her Late Majesty demonstrated consistently, and the fact that she was very much aware. You mentioned in fact, I think both of you gentlemen have mentioned the Commonwealth in some way, shape, or form. But certainly, I believe there are now 53 members of the Commonwealth, approximately.
56.
56.
56.
Oh, yes, of course. And, sir, pardon me for forgetting that I was aware that that you are very much involved in is it the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, sir?
No. I am the honorary representative of the Royal Commonwealth Society for the Cayman Islands.
And what does that entail, sir?
Well, it's an honorary position, right. And I organize all of the events relating to the Commonwealth. For example, on Commonwealth Day, yes, which happens to be the second Monday in March every year, right, we plan a church service. We organize an essay competition that's one of the oldest writing competitions in the world. It's called the Royal Essay Competition. So we organize that through our schools, right, and so I do little things like that, yes, that keeps the flag flying for the Commonwealth as well.
But given Her Late Majesty's particular interest in ensuring the ongoing viability of the Commonwealth, and therefore her treatment of it very much like she treated her own country, by all accounts, and from everything that I've seen and read. The fact that she actually visited so many of the Commonwealth countries so frequently, did you, or do you, in your capacity now, go to other Commonwealth countries, say regionally at least, or?
I haven't. Only, and it's not that I couldn't, but I haven't. The Commonwealth is an association of voluntary countries. Everybody that joins on a voluntary basis. There's not a lot of funding to support moving around and travel.
I see.
But I should say that on Commonwealth Day, too, we traditionally, in recent times, we've had something called Fly a Flag for the Commonwealth, and that's a very short, brief ceremony that's conducted on the grounds of the government building.
Yes,
and we simply have the flag of the Commonwealth raised for 24 hours and then taken down. And on that day also, we have something in the Parliament called the Youth Parliament, which is organized and sponsored by the Cayman Islands branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association.
Right, sir.
And they have been running that Youth Parliament now for almost 15 years, I believe. So it's been quite well established. So the Commonwealth is recognizable, and we try to keep the flag flying at every opportunity possible.
Yes. Yeah. Indeed, one of the comments that I overheard, one of the reporters at the BBC mentioned today is the fact that Her Late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, was so keen on ensuring that the Commonwealth remained the Commonwealth insofar as possible, and she went to great lengths to try to gain better understanding where she may not have necessarily had the opportunity to do so prior, of each culture, of each country. And it is really quite impressive when you consider, as you mentioned, there are 56 members. So I just wanted to ask you comparatively, you were already, sir, a very senior civil servant, contrary to what you said about being middle management, at her first visit in 1983. And then subsequently, obviously, you were in the most senior post in the civil service, I believe, at the time of her second visit. And so what I want to ask you about is something which touches home, which was it abundantly clear to you at that on both visits that the people of the Cayman Islands are very much, by and large, it appears, dedicated to the monarchy, and most importantly, the relationship with Britain?
Yes, undoubtedly. I have said repeatedly that I believe that the Caymanian people are more British than the British.
Right.
Because the Caymanians have demonstrated time and time again that they are very pro-monarchy. And in fact, her visit in 1983 was shortly after the Cayman Islands had donated £500,000 to the families of those affected by the Falkland War. Yes. And so that was one way that we could demonstrate tangibly our commitment and support and love and respect for what was happening globally.
Yes.
So I don't think that spirit has changed much.
Right.
Although we've heard people saying that it should be debated, and I agree that it's something that would be value in debating, but I don't think that the Caymanian people are ready for any advancement beyond the present relationship.
Yes, sir. And I mean, I wasn't actually asking about the political side because I wouldn't go there with you, sir. But certainly, no, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm sure we all do. In fact, one may have thought that the place once referred to as the lawless Caymanas would not have been as loyal as it in fact is. But I think that is a very, very genuinely expressed sentiment that pervades the majority of Caymanian people, and that is despite the fact that we ourselves have had massive changes, and we're 4,000 or 5,000 miles away from the United Kingdom, but nevertheless the relationship seems to have gotten stronger as we become a larger I mean, at the time of Her Majesty's first visit, we would have been around maybe 20,000 persons.
Yes.
And at the time of the second visit, we would have been much nearer to 45,000, I would think.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's a substantial increase. And like Britain itself, we have become more diverse. Various cultures coming in and becoming a part of the Caymanian society, various religions, and so on. And indeed, I would imagine. Though I would be speculating to an extent, but I would imagine that some portion of the constitutional changes that occurred, the modernization of our constitution, so to speak, was certainly as a result of that type of impetus.
Yes, certainly, and that's the way it should be.
Yes,
growth and development go hand in hand. And success follows success.
Right.
So wherever we've been successful and we've been able to build on that and promote that.
Yes.
Our key industries of financial services and tourism have served us well, but building and construction and other things have come along. Medical tourism has come along. Other things are starting to help to enlarge the strength of the Cayman economy, and with that will come more success.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of that success is probably by and large guided by our continued relationship, a mutually beneficial relationship with Britain.
Indeed.
Indeed, as many of us as British citizens, full British citizens, so to speak.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Shelton, can you perhaps enlighten us a little bit more on the type of or the frequency, rather, with which you mentioned planning in respect of the UK's activities, or the types of planning that goes into the preparation for such major events as this. Is that the same sort of system that is being implemented here in Cayman with respect to the regiment?
We're not involved with the overall planning
at
the moment in Cayman. It's predominantly done with protocol and the RCIPS. However, we do have meetings with the other uniformed services and the RCIPS, and we do discuss some of the plans about upcoming parades and what the format's going to be and so on and so forth. But at the moment, predominantly it is RCIPS and protocol that gear that planning or start that planning process off.
Right.
And then when we sit down and we have meetings, then we might mention other areas that to be considered or also thought about. But at the moment, we're not involved in any major way the actual planning at the moment.
So I suppose the reason why I asked that question was from the perspective that clearly, and God forbid that we should have another natural disaster such as Ivan, but nevertheless it is something that could very well happen, and for which we always need to be prepared for. But in light of the connection between the likes of the regiment and certain elements of military, the army, of the UK, is there sort of a working together of those arms of the military to prepare for things like major natural disaster?
Yeah, if we're talking about sort of humanitarian issues and disasters as a whole, yes, then we are liaison with various United Kingdom military assets who come across and do recce's of the island. So they do a reconnaissance to see, for example, what's the port like, what kind of ship can come in here, what's the contingency plan, what's the size of the runway, is there an alternative, how fast can get the runway up and running, and so on and so forth. So is there beaches that we can land heavy equipment on, like JCBs, etc., to be able to move it across and support if for whatever reason we can't use the port or we can't use the airport. So in that side of it, there is a lot. However, a lot of that is geared and driven through the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, i.e. the Governor's Office, FCDO. So they liaise quite heavily with the British assets. And when in the region, we do work with them and we will exercise alongside them, because that's all about our planning and preparation, even to the degree of what radio systems are they operating on to what we're operating on the ground if we need to talk to them. So and what assets have they got that we can utilise here should we need it.
Yes.
So what type of ship are they going to send? What assets are on that ship? So if they got engineers that can come out and help with critical national infrastructure, have they got helicopters that can help move relief or injured individuals and so on and so forth? So from that side of it, we are, when they're in theatre, as in on island, we will work alongside them. So we'll have our own sort of plan and preparation.
Right.
Outside of that, though, we're already planning and preparing for various activities that may or may not happen, if you want to call it that. So for ourselves, we're continuously planning for various eventualities should the needs arise for us to be able to deploy on island or to the sister islands in that manner. So that's what, for us, that's what the Cayman Islands Regiment's all about on the humanitarian side.
Right.
So outside of the public duty side, the ceremonial side, dressed as I am now,
yes.
our main function is humanitarian aid and disaster relief, either on island or if we're called to help one of our neighbours.
Yes.
So we're constantly planning for that. So we're training our reservists in the skills and the mindset and the equipment that we've procured to be able to carry out that.
Yes.
And we're in a really good place now. So if something happens on the island, we're fairly comfortable that we can definitely assist.
Right.
Because the issue that you're going to have, like Hurricane Fiona is often off there now, Puerto Rico, going towards Turks and Caicos,
yes.
and then ultimately swinging around towards Bahamas and Northern later on. Now, in all eventualities, even though for argument's sake, for a hurricane, we'll generally know 3 to 5 days out where it's going within reason.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to get here within the first 24 hours of that coming through, and that's really where we excel. For the 24 hours before, where we help plan and prepare a lot of locations, move people around, move equipment around, not just ours, but we might be moving elderly people to shelters, etc. And then once it's come through, what we do after that, until the cavalry, if you want to call it, that can get here and then help us with further equipment, technical support and manning.
Right.
So it's in that 24 hours before and the 24 hours during and after, which is where we really excel.
Thank you, sir. And indeed, just by way of reminder that that this all relates, obviously, to our bringing together the various elements of what is involved in running the Commonwealth, running individual countries, and the way it correlates to, indeed, the way things are done in the United Kingdom, and the pride with which Her Late Majesty held, and the esteem for which she held the armed forces, as well as the civil service, and all things that kept that country and indeed the realm running as it should, in her opinion. Mm-hmm. Would you agree, Mr. Hurlston?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, did we have a call on the line? Oh, pardon me. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a distinct pleasure and honor for me to be here today to mark the passing of Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and to both celebrate as well as to mourn her passing, as well as mark this fact that we now have a new sovereign, and I have had the distinct pleasure also of the presence of some very experienced gentlemen in their own rights, the Honourable Mr. Lemuel Hurlston, as well as Mr. David Shelton, and so I'd like to thank our guests for making the time to come here to be with us and to share with the listening audience. With that in mind, gentlemen, I'd like to ask if you have a minute or two for anything, any last thoughts that you'd like to share with the listening public.
Well, I can just say that today is really a bittersweet day because we say farewell to Her Majesty, but we also welcome our new monarch, and such is life.
Sir.
And the other thing I'll say is that there's an abiding respect globally for Her Majesty, and the number of persons that turned out to pay their respects in the last few days is just indicative of that respect and love.
Absolutely. That
she so graciously earned by being humble, by being courteous, and by being kind.
Yes, sir.
I think she's leaving behind a marvelous legacy for us to emulate and follow.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that, Mr. Shelton.
I think for me, it was an honour to serve Her Majesty. I served there for just under 14 years in my normal military career. So, like everybody else in the armed forces, we've got a massive amount of respect for the Queen and the royal family as a whole. So from my point of view, she'll be greatly missed because a lot of people even seen her as a motherly figure as opposed to just Her Majesty. And we're now entering a new chapter of the royal family with now His Majesty the King.
Yes.
So I wish him and the family all the best moving forward.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. We're going to be going very shortly to the news. I'd like to thank the listening audience for participating in this segment of today's special presentation honouring Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And please stay tuned after the news for the third segment of today's program. Thank you.
The voice of the Cayman Islands.
89.9 FM in Grand Cayman and 93.9 FM in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman.
Silver wings shining in the sunlight.
Radio Cayman.
Radio Cayman's 12 p.m. newscast is brought to you by Health City Cayman Islands. World-class healthcare within your reach.
Whether it's routine care or highly complex surgery, when it comes to your health, you want the best. Health City has Cayman's most comprehensive range of in-house medical services. Recognized for quality and excellence, Health City brings together expert doctors, the best technology, and the latest techniques to understand your health and ensure you get the care you need. From Camana Bay to East End, you can trust the team at Health City. Health City, world-class healthcare within your reach.
With your latest news, I'm April Cummings. The Cayman Islands joins the world in paying our respects to Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose state funeral was held at 5 this morning. People gathered at local churches and at specified locations on Grand Cayman, Cayman Brac, and Little Cayman to watch the service and procession live.
Her Late Majesty famously declared on a 21st birthday broadcast that her whole life would be dedicated to serving the nation and Commonwealth. Rarely has such a promise been so well kept. Few leaders receive the outpouring of love that we have seen.
A delegation from Cayman attended today's service.
Cayman's delegation at the funeral of Her Late Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II, led by the Premier and myself, paid respects at the coffin of Her Late Majesty in Westminster Hall on Saturday. It was a moving and poignant moment for all of us, including Mrs. Panton, Mrs. Roper, Cabinet Secretary Sam Rose and Dr. Tasha Garcia, head of the London office. I am also very pleased that 6 officers from our Sept, our police service, joined us in London and are invited to line the funeral route along with other overseas territory police officers at the funeral.
The Queen's coffin was carried from Westminster Hall to the Abbey on a gun carriage that was used for the funeral of Edward VIII, George V and VI, and Sir Winston Churchill, pulled by 142 Royal Navy sailors. After the service, the last post, and a 2-minute national silence, followed by a lament played by the Queen's Piper. The Queen's coffin was carried to Wellington Arch before being conveyed to Windsor by road and then a commitment service. The Queen will rest in the St. George VI Memorial Chapel with her husband Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, who died last year. A final private burial service for close family members is scheduled for 1:30 p.m. Cayman time. Stay tuned this morning for more coverage, a Radio Cayman special, a reflection on the life of Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. We will begin with 2 hours of special BBC programming until 10 a.m. when our live panel discussions get underway until 1 p.m., followed by additional special programming. During church services across the island this weekend, there were prayers and condolences for Her Late Majesty and her family. A number participated in a formal program for the National Weekend of Prayer.
Merciful Father and Lord of all life, we praise you that we are made in your image and reflect your truth and light.
We thank you for the life of our late sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, for the love she received from you and showed among us.
Above all, we rejoice at your gracious promise to all your servants, living and departed,
that we shall rise again at the coming of Christ.
And we ask that in due time we may share with your servant Elizabeth
that clearer vision promised to us in the same Christ, our Lord.
Amen.
From Radio Cayman's newsroom, I'm April Cummings.
Each one of us is different, and so are our health needs. Health City's executive health checks are packaged for you as an individual, including optional add-ons tailored to your health journey. We have a variety of health checks to suit your age, gender, lifestyle, and family medical history. Visit healthcity.ky to find the health check package that suits you best and book your Health City health check today. At Health City, we know healthy looks different on everyone.
Radio Cayman's 12 p.m. newscast is brought to you by Health City Cayman Islands. World-class healthcare within your reach.
Play your part in giving information. If you see news happening, contact our newsroom 949-7799.
Satisfaction is guaranteed 24 hours a day, whether it's music or information.
From Grand Cayman to Cayman Brac to Little Cayman, we've got you covered.
You ever hear a thing like that?
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
I fear the Burger King is losing it.
Is he adding more sandwiches to the two for $8 again?
Yes, look.
And the crispy chicken. Ooh, and the Yumbo ham and cheese. The Whopper, the big fish.
The best deal on island just got even bigger. Choose from the iconic Whopper, crispy chicken sandwich, original chicken sandwich, the big fish, the Yumbo ham and cheese. And make any of them spicy. And 2 for just $8. Only available at Burger King.
The Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage invites the public to join them for the next event in the Caymanian Proud series, where they showcase our uniform services. Hear from members of the RCIPS, Prison Service, Fire Service, Cadet Corps, CI Regiment and more as they discuss the history, mission and legacy of the organizations which serve and protect the people of the Cayman Islands. Learn about job opportunities too. Thursday, September 22nd, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Marriott Ballroom. Admission is free.
The weather report is brought to you by Kirk Home Center. We've got a great deal in store for you.
Listen, good afternoon, Cayman. Let's take a look at the weather on this Monday. Light easterly winds and seas will continue across the Cayman area for the next 24 hours due to a weak pressure gradient across the Northwest Caribbean. And of course, at 10 a.m., the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida is issuing advisories on Hurricane Fiona, which was located at 19.1 north, 69.2 west, or about 10 miles southeast of Samana, Dominican Republic. Fiona is moving northwest at 8 miles per hour with maximum sustained winds of 85 miles per hour. The storm poses no immediate threat to the Cayman Islands based on the latest forecast track. Of course, the Cayman Islands Weather Service will continue to monitor the progress of this storm. For more information, visit www.nhc.noaa.gov. Our forecast right now, partly cloudy skies with showers, light showers. Temperatures will rise to the low 90s with a heat index of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds will be east to northeast at 5 to 10 knots. Seas will be smooth with wave heights less than 2 feet. Then later tonight, partly cloudy skies with a 30% chance of showers. Temperatures will fall to the upper 70s. Winds will be east to northeast at 5 to 10 knots or less. seas will be smooth with wave heights less than 2 feet. With a low tide, high tide is coming up at 6:51 this evening. Sunset is at 6:23, and the outlook is for similar weather conditions across the Cayman area through Wednesday morning, as Hurricane Fiona is expected to move east of the Bahamas. That's your latest weather right here on Radio Cayman.
Kirk's Home Center, we can make your life much better. We got it all together. We got a great deal in store for you. From cookware to stereos, from power tools to plumbing supplies. Yeah, we got the best goods with the best price and a service to make you smile. Kirk's Home Center, we got a great deal in store for you.
The weather report is brought to you by Kirk Home Center. We've got a great deal in store for you.
The Cayman Islands boasts of a long, colorful, and rich history. In tribute to our roots, Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands, is pleased to bring you the Historical Vignette Series, brought to you by Rotary Central. For more than 110 years, Rotary members have used their passion, energy, and intelligence to take action on sustainable projects. The Cayman Islands, He hath founded it upon the seas.
John Goodhue, late 1700s, 1840. G.T. John Goodhue was a vestryman representing Southwest South at the time of the 1831 meeting to establish an assembly of magistrates and vestry, the beginning of parliamentary democracy in the Cayman Islands.
The Atlantic hurricane season is now through November 30. International weather authorities predict up to 21 named storms and 6 major hurricanes. Prepare now. Select your place of safety before the storm. Get supplies now when it's easy to shop, avoiding long lines and crowds. Secure your valuables, your documents, your medicines, your first aid kit. Keep a photographic record of your valuables. Charge your phone, get more credit. Plan where to safely park your car. Preparation now makes sense. A message from Rotary Central, planning ahead for disasters since 1997. Rotary, all the good you imagine.
Radio Cayman's Historical Vignettes was brought to you by Rotary Central. For more than 110 years, Rotary members have used their passion, energy, and intelligence to take action on sustainable projects.
Wouldn't it have been grand if you had purchased land 30 years ago? It may not be 2020, but a perfect vision has never been more clear. Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, poised for growth with an eye on the future. Your land, your history, your future. Discover all that our sister islands have to offer.
Water Authority Cayman wishes to advise its valued customers and the motoring public of planned works to upgrade the water supply infrastructure along Marina Drive between Almond Avenue and the Harbour House Marina. Preliminary work began the week of 12th September. Work will take place weekdays between 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. The project will last for approximately 12 weeks. During the course of the works, traffic management measures will be in place with signs directing the traffic flow. Motorists are encouraged to drive with caution when they are in the area to protect their safety and the safety of the Water Authority's staff. Customers in the area may experience service outages throughout the work. The authority will make every effort to give advanced notice related to outages. Customers can visit our website www.waterauthority.ky for outage notices. The Water Authority appreciates the patience and understanding of its customers and the public as it undertakes these works and apologizes for any inconvenience this may cause.
Your Radio Cayman 6 p.m. news, Monday through Friday, is brought to you by Logic. Your life connected.
I've got some beautiful clothes. I know just where they go. Puritan Cleaners.
Puritan Cleaners, now using the most popular and eco-friendly cleaning solvents. 2 convenient locations to serve you: Savannah Countryside and Eastern Avenue, Georgetown. Drive-through, rain or shine, free pickup and delivery services available. Call Puritan Cleaners, 949-7104. Also ask about our in-house discounts. Puritan Cleaners, you feel good when you look good.
Puritan Cleaners, 949-7104. That's 949-7104. We think it's time you crossed over to a new vehicle. And with the Toyota Corolla Cross now at Vamp Motors, you have plenty of reasons to make the switch. The crossover body and hybrid engine is a sleek design in a sturdy structure with a spacious interior that opens to extensive cargo space. Stuck in traffic? The high-performance self-charging hybrid system automatically switches between gas and electric vehicle mode, helping you lower both fuel costs and carbon emissions. The Corolla Cross has full LED lighting inside and out, an integrated display audio system with energy monitor, and a dual-zone climate control system to ensure comfort for all. Test drive the new Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid today at Vamp Motors, Walkers Road.
The Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage invites nominations to the 2023 National Heroes Day Awards. The theme is volunteerism and charitable services. Nominate a person or non-profit organization that has exceptionally contributed to the Cayman Islands. To nominate, visit gov.ky/YSCH and click Nominate for NHD. The deadline for submissions is midnight, Sunday, 16th of October. Call 244-2424 for more information. Nominate your hero, Cayman.
Good afternoon, Cayman, and thank you so very much for tuning in as we present the next segment in Radio Cayman's special programming today, a reflection on the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. My name is Gloria McField Nixon, and I am absolutely honored to be joined in the studio this afternoon by two esteemed guests, the Honorable Mary Lawrence, a former Speaker of the Parliament, and Miss Lucille Seymour, a former Member of Parliament. They are both historians, community advocates, and a wealth of knowledge. So I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gloria.
Thank you. Before we get underway, I would like to advise our listeners that, and those who are joining us via YouTube this afternoon, that at 12:30, in approximately 12 minutes, our program will pause as the Cayman Islands observes 2 minutes of silence in memory of Her Late Majesty. Following the 2 minutes of silence, the special broadcast will continue. But Honorable Mary Lawrence and Miss Lucille Seymour, again, good afternoon, and thank you for participating in today's program.
Thank you, too. I'm glad to be here.
So I have to ask the question, and I got an indication from you, Miss Lawrence, but who was up this morning to watch the services?
I was up from 3 o'clock.
I was up. I got up at 2, and then I couldn't go back to sleep, so I stayed up and watched it till I came out of the house.
So for the benefit of those who are on radio today, those who are watching via YouTube will see that we have our tea sets out today because it has been already a long day. And so we're taking a sip of tea to keep us going through our conversation. But I know we're going to have such riveting conversation about all of the memories that we're able to share that we probably won't need the tea, but no harm in having it anyway. So earlier today, along with us, millions around the world watched the state funeral for Her Late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, at Westminster Abbey. And the gathering was most impressive. We had other monarchs, we've had presidents, emperors, prime ministers, all told some 2,000 heads of state and other dignitaries. And among this distinguished gathering, Cayman was well represented with His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Martin Roper and Mrs. Roper, and our Premier, the Honorable Wayne Panton and Mrs. Panton. The tremendous gathering was representative not only of the Queen's stature, but I believe of the way that she touched persons and symbolically united so many. What are your views?
It wasn't just kings and queens and princes and heads of state. There were people there who had served her from her household. The woman who had stayed with her during the COVID lockdown, she was there, and there were so many people that were remembered that had, not only she had touched her life, but he had touched hers in some way. And then, of course, when they got to the internment part of the service, there was all these people that were gathered that had served in her household were there to be included in that service. So, she was everybody's queen. There was no question about that. And she was humble. She was friendly. She gave their parents all the time of knowing you, almost as though when she actually knew you. And there were so many stories today that were related where she would meet someone, and a long time later she would meet them again, and she would remember what it was all about. And I heard people talk about that with Cayman whenever they went to see her or they managed to touch ground with her somewhere. She always asked about the islands and about something that she remembered about Cayman. And I found that very, very inclusive.
I think that's an excellent point. So many people will talk about her 2 visits to these islands, and anyone who had the opportunity to speak with her afterwards, even our governor, will say how she was able to bring up details of those visits and the things that really stood out to her. What stood out to you from those 2 visits that she had to Cayman? So we had 1983 and 1994.
Well, I was happy to have met her, briefly as it was, then. And then afterwards I was in her presence, but not speaking to her 3 times. Wow. But I've always been an admirer. I call her Queenie. And my friends call her Queenie too. We got, relationships. Yeah. When she looks into your eyes when she talks to you, and she'll say, and what do you do? And look at you, and she expects you to respond. But I Cayman, growing up in Cayman, we have always liked the royalty. And those of us that could read well, and I don't say that with any disparagement.
Right.
We read a lot on Queenie. As a matter of fact, for some of us, especially public servants, she was our model in terms of her hats and in terms of reading a little bit about her formality and her grace and how she put her hand when she took pictures. And it is true. She was the big role model for women in the world. Some of the dresses now, perhaps you may not wear, but in the time that she existed with us, you would have worn those.
Oh, the styles are coming back, don't worry.
And she had what I think when you hear the song, "God Save the King or the Queen," it really helped her to live. Think about those words. Send her victorious, happy and glorious. Maybe she reign over us, and it really happened. And then she fulfilled what she said when she was 21.
Yes.
That will go down as it will never be erased from history. What she said when she was 21, she lived it.
But, her service started long before that because she served during the war.
Yes.
She was a mechanic, a trained mechanic. And she was actually out there in a uniform. And one of the pictures we have at Bodden Town is a picture of her in that uniform. And we also have a picture of her on the balcony, her mother and father and her sister, who was much younger, Margaret, and Winston Churchill when the declaration was made that the war was over. And she was there in her military uniform. And, her, surprisingly, one of the things that I've picked up about her was that when she was very young, her father, in 1939, the country was going to war, and he was getting ready to make his speech, and her father suffered from a speech impediment.
Yes.
So he had to practice his speech well before he went on the air. And she was just a little girl, and she brought a poem to him and asked him if he would include that in the speech. And it was something that stuck in the minds of the British people during that entire war period. And the poem was this one. I said to the man who stood at the gate of the air, Give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown. And he replied, Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way. Wow. And she was just a little girl when she asked her father to include that in his speech in 1939.
She seems to always have had the knack for connecting to people, of knowing what was needed in the moment.
All of her speeches show that. I mean, one of the most recent ones during the COVID pandemic.
I remember it well.
You know, they used it today in her service.
In
the service,
yeah.
you know, that we would be together again. It was a very encouraging speech for a country that was in lockdown. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was encouraging to me.
Coming back
to many of us.
To what happened in Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
What I liked about it, that the school children got to be involved. And I mean, they were most impressed, you know, to see how come by them, or to see Prince Philip come. But they were a god, you know. You should see their faces, and I think that is good of Cayman when we have dignitaries and such people like that come here. They always bring the children out, and I hope that this will not be the end of their historical knowledge and research on Queen Elizabeth, because she's been very effective in her 70 years. And I do hope that Cayman will remember her in a sort of building an edifice or something like that. Because when the king died, we got the clock.
Yes, yes.
So now that we have our queen for 70 years,
for
96 years,
monarch
has passed away, the longest monarch. We should have something in our towns, in the various districts, not just in Georgetown, but do an edifice or some memorial of Queenie.
We have a memorial to Queen Victoria in Bodden Town.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So we have a memorial for Queen Victoria as well.
Yes, in Bodden Town.
Not just a memorial, but something more.
That was put up by the Bodden Town people when Queen Victoria died. And
well, you have a monument in the Old Prospect. I can't remember who's the Old Prospect. There's a monument there too, I think.
But that's not related to monarchy. But there was one in Georgetown where the immigration building is, and they took it down when they were putting the building up.
But isn't that the same one? Same one.
And we put up a memorial at Pedro Castle. When we did the Diamond Jubilee.
Yes, yes.
We built the memorial out of the Cape stone, and Home Gas built the blower for us and supplied the gas. And that is still supposed to be lit on special occasions. I don't know if they lit it during this period or not, but it should have been lit during that time.
And our relationship with the Queen, that is the Cayman Islands, has helped us tremendously.
I wanted to talk about that.
Yes, and I always say that Queenie is the biggest tourism attractor in England. She brings in millions and millions of dollars, and she's even opened up, I think it was Windsor Castle. Yeah. She opened up in parts of the Parliament so that the tourists could walk about and see.
Okay, I'm going to put a pause just there because we're 8 seconds away from our 2 minutes of silence in memory of Her Late Majesty.
Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's state funeral took place in the United Kingdom earlier this morning. Following the death of Her Late Majesty on September 8, the Cayman Islands government invited radio stations across the Cayman Islands to observe 2 minutes of silence as a mark of respect for the late monarch at 12:30 p.m. today, Monday, September 19. This radio station is honored to silence our airwaves, and we encourage you to join us right now for 2 minutes of silence wherever you are, at home, on your own, with family, friends, and neighbors, as together we mourn and reflect on the life and legacy of our late Queen Elizabeth II, who served on the throne for over 70 years. May Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor rest in peace, and may God's perpetual light shine upon her. Let us now pause for 2 minutes of silence as we remember Her Late Majesty. thank you. May the new sovereign, King Charles III, enjoy a long, gracious reign. God save the King.
Thank you and welcome back. You are listening to Radio Cayman special programming reflecting the life of Her Late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. I'm Gloria McField Nixon, and I'm joined this afternoon by the Honorable Mary Lawrence and Miss Lucille Seymour. Just before the 2 minutes of silence, we were reflecting upon the Queen's visit and what she has meant to these islands, and indeed what the monarchy has meant and how we continue to have places within the Cayman Islands where we have commemorated the service of past monarchs. We were having a discussion about surely there is no monarch more deserving than our late Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the longest-serving monarch and the monarch to have visited these islands twice during her lifetime.
Well, on one of her visits, we named the Botanic Park after her, and another one we have the Queen's Highway named after her. But it would not hurt for us to have something more substantial that you can see, whether it's a plinth with a plaque on it or whatever it might be, something to draw attention to the fact that, yes, we do hold her in high regard in this country. You asked what it was like when she came.
Mm-hmm.
I find on the first visit, Miss Lucille mentioned the school children. Well, the school children were at the airport. Mm-hmm. They lined the airport. They lined the streets. They were everywhere. People were everywhere. Thousands of people came out to see her, just to stand and watch her walk by and drive by in a car and wave at her. And when the second visit came, we didn't have as much fanfare with that. When we had a lot of people lining the streets and whatever, but we didn't have as much fanfare, I don't think. But what we did have that I found very interesting and it's particularly when you read her life, that she never missed going to church on a Sunday, no matter where she was.
Right.
And she went to church that Sunday here in Cayman.
Wow.
And the prince read the scripture lesson that Sunday morning. And, of course, up at our display, we have the program for all of that.
And which church would that have been? Was that Elmsley?
Elmsley. Oh, yes. That was Elmsley. We have the program up there for all of that.
Oh, wow.
And we have numerous programs of all of even the things that we have celebrated here every year. We have the programs for all of that as well. It's all up there. This is the program for Her Majesty's visit to the church.
So tell me, when you say up there, where would people see these programs and these artifacts from the
visit? You have to come to the Bodden Town Heritage Site, which is the Nurse Joseph Senior Center and Heritage House, right down in Gun Square. We have a huge collection of books concerning Her Majesty. We have her speeches. We have the speech she made on both occasions when she was here. We have it on display. We have things like this. This was Prep School's magazine.
I've seen all this.
That was Prep School's magazine that they put out.
Wow.
When she came, they wrote little poems, and they have pictures of it in it that, they don't do as much of that in schools anymore, I notice.
No.
Because when we had the Arts Festival, the National Arts Festival, we always printed a book every year with the poems and all the speeches and stuff, stories that children wrote. And we have those in Bodden Town. We laminate them, and we have them on the doors and on the trees and everywhere for people to read when they come to see it.
I love this caption. So we have this caption from the Nor'Wester magazine, March 1983, and it reads, "And at long, long last, our mother has come home." I think that was really telling of how many Caymanians felt when she visited these islands. I remember in 1983, I was at university in 94 when she would have visited, but in 83, I remember Shedden Road was...
Well, there was a controversy. I didn't want to bring it up, but
I remember there being a lot of tidying that took place
was a
at that time.
controversy whether she should go through there or not. And I know my late brother George went through the whole Shedden Road and painted areas that should have painted, but they decided that she would not drive through the main road.
I remember that road being tidied. I mean, it was spick and span, and not just. It that doesn't even capture it. It feels like you could have eaten off the streets, every yard, the fences, the homes. There was so much pride and joy that was coming from the visit. Everyone was preparing themselves.
Yes, we planted the garden at Guardhouse Hill in her honor when she was coming that trip. And of course, she met the Bodden Town people assembled in the town hall yard, and everybody was there. Mm-hmm. There weren't any limits on who could come. Everybody was there that wanted to go. School children, older people, everybody was there. And, they'd built a little Cayman-style kitchen with wattles and furnished it so she could see what it was like and thatched the roof. All of that was there.
When she arrived, she was taken around the various districts by the legislators at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I thought that she had a great time in North Side and in West Bay.
Yes.
There were a lot of older ladies, and there was Cousin Julia. She was alive at the time.
Yes.
So she had a lot to say to her. And I understand she remembered her on the next trip that she came back. But the Caymanians, remember now, Cayman was not colonized, so the whole taking of being British came from the Jamaica side because we were administered by Jamaica, who was British at the time, and the reference, "At last she comes home." I remember she visited Jamaica 6 times. Mm-hmm. It was the only Caribbean country that she has visited so much. She and then she visited Bermuda more than she visited. Well, we got her twice. Some of the Caribbean countries she's only visited once.
Well, I was going to say,
she visited Australia, Canada, either 16 or 20-something times.
We have a picture of her dancing a square dance in Canada. Mm-hmm. We have 110 frame photographs of her.
Wow!
In the exhibition, besides the poster boards with her speeches and meeting foreign dignitaries, pictures of her with Mandela and all those, all the heads of state in other countries.
It would have seemed as though her visits, both in the 80s and then a decade later in 90s, really sort of was around the time Cayman was really taking off. And it was, the only time I had the pleasure of being in her presence, as it were, we were actually in the UK. It was the very first time that the Cayman Islands, sponsored by the Department of Tourism at the time, the Queen Elizabeth II Botanic Park actually had a exhibit at the Chelsea Flower Show.
Yes, I remember that.
And we took, not only did we, there was a lot of fuss. We were trying to get our ghost orchid there, and it never made it there. There was a lot of issues around that and controversy around that. But the exhibit included our architecture. We had an old Cayman house that had been fabricated and modeled there. And although it was the first time the Cayman Islands ever exhibited at the Chelsea Flower Show, we still medaled, which was quite the talk because it's a very competitive thing. People have been doing this, for so long.
Years, yeah.
And she visited us. And she remembered and talked about, oh, yes, it bears my name. and I was struck then by how petite a lady she was. but how large her presence was. You were just, I only found out that morning that I was going to get a chance to meet her. And so I went through all of this hasty preparations, trying to learn how to curtsy. And I'm not the most agile person. So I remember being completely stressed about this encounter. And she just had this way of putting you at calm, of letting you know that she saw you and she could tell all the effort you were putting in.
One of the pictures we have, the latest one we have of her, is when she was commissioning the new prime minister. Mm-hmm. And the prime minister is a tall, elegant lady, and she's so small, and she has on her plaid skirt, and she has a most beautiful smile on her face as she's talking to her with her cane in her hand. That was 2 days before she died.
Wow.
And it's a... But one of the things that we have failed to do in recent years is to include young people in the things that are going on. Even our National Heroes Day. When I did the Platinum Jubilee here in Cayman.
Yes.
And here and in Cayman Bragg both, because you couldn't do something here and didn't repeat it over there. They got their monument there too.
Absolutely.
But we had 500 school children marching to the British flag in that parade, and it was led by, the flags were carried by 3 men on black horses. And, I mean, it was, I think, the largest parade that they've ever had. We had the school bands. We didn't just have the police band. We had the school bands. We had just everything into it, because to me, it was a huge celebration of a life that was well lived. I mean, at that point in time, Platinum Jubilee, who would have thought that should have gone on to, the Diamond Jubilee, that should have gone on to make the Platinum Jubilee, And so, we have a habit of not promoting history and not sharing our history, our own personal history, the Cayman history. We don't share it. When she took the throne in 1952. We didn't have a dock. We had an iron stake and iron shore that they threw the rope for the boat around to tie it up. We didn't have roads. We had sand roads. We didn't have a constitution. Women didn't have the right to vote. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have running water. We didn't even have proper schools. We didn't. At that point in time, we had just the government didn't have a secondary education system. The secondary education system was put up by the churches. So when you think of how far this country has come in that period of time since she took the throne to where we are today, people forget where we came from, and we don't spend enough time telling them how this country was built.
Well, the colonization of Jamaica did not extend to us. I grew up almost in that era. It did not extend to us. A lot of us who know a lot about the royalty, because we read it. It was not, even then it wasn't taught to us. Yes, the commissioners came, but they had a clique of people that they didn't circle themselves with. They were not with the common people in the Cayman Islands. You were lucky if you were a young girl growing up and you ever saw the commissioner.
Yes.
But it's because we did not have that, and I'm not saying that this was a right thing. We did not have that level of colonialization that Jamaica had. And because Jamaica was colonized, a lot of British people were there, not here. I remember when I was growing up, you could count 5 Britishers on one hand. The first real Britisher I met was when I went to high school, the commissioner's wife. We had a few people who came here as VSOs, volunteer organization people, but we did not have a lot of Britishers come here. And if Miss Mira can remember, the one constant Britisher we had, it was a man named John Bolton. He was after the war. He used to live out by Capt Ben Bar. You remember hearing of him?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. That was the one constant that we had here. So it was really during the 70s and 60s that we started to get the influx of British people come here and establish, and we got a lot more British teachers, that this awareness came out. But Caymanians have always have always thought about the royalty. They've
Right.
always thought about it because I grew up in the era of King George, where he, when he died,
Mhm.
and I grew up in the era of Queen Elizabeth, with her coronation, and coming back to her, and how she changed the world. She was the glue to the world,
Well, I was going to say that. I mean, we've talked about how much Cayman has changed in this time, but she reigned
changed
over
the half of the 20th century.
Yes.
Because remember, when she had her coronation, it was in television.
Yes.
She had the
black and white.
She had
It had just come in fact.
Yes.
She had the first Christmas televised.
Yes.
And real trendsetter. History will be exceedingly kind to her. I think when the real books are written about the late Her Majesty.
So speaking of all of this change in the trend setting, even in her funeral, I understand that while it had become part of the tradition to have the children of the monarch to be a part of the procession at the death of a monarch, I believe this is the first time that we've seen a female member participate as integrally as
in the military.
as Princess Anne, Princess Royal did.
Mm.
And it was striking to see her there with her brothers, and she marched that long procession. She was there. She was with her mother in her final hours as queen, but also as her mother. What do you think we have seen in terms of the things that have changed, not only in the Cayman Islands, but as a result of the impact the Queen had as a leader and as a female leader? What have we seen in the world?
She's done a lot. She will always be remembered for her leadership with the Commonwealth. No other monarch or leader in this world has commanded the respect as she has.
Right.
I mean, she has done some things. I remember someone telling me, I think it was Ghana. Ghana was courting Russia or someplace like that, in those days. And she actually went there and danced with him. And, I mean...
History, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
the way...
Yes,
she was
she
a
did.
subtle lady, smart, very subtle, not boisterous and vociferous, but she had her head and she read well. She was a good reader. And she knew a lot about the countries. But I will always remember the late Her Majesty for how she kept the Commonwealth together.
Well,
despite that some became republics,
Yes.
they still go to the meetings.
She actually gave birth to the Commonwealth.
She did, yes.
It was her who. It was just a few countries to begin with, but she built on that.
It was the empire, remember?
To pull people together.
Well, the empire beginning to recede, and the empire was very much built out of might. But I think what she was able to do in creating that transition was she created a new relationship, one that was built out of respect and shared ideals, shared values, and it has been very enduring, very powerful, that foundation that she has laid. I mean, when you think about how much Britain changed during that time, and the world has changed.
The world has changed. We went to space. We did all kinds of things during her 70 years on that throne. Transportation has changed all around the place.
Yes.
They pulled her casket today on a gun carriage that was there from the 1700s, but in truth and fact, they have cars that are powered by electricity today.
Yes.
The
self-driving.
Yeah. The whole world has changed in that regard.
Well, the Queen came out,
but she changed with it.
She did.
That was
she embraced. If you think about COVID and the outreach that she would have done during COVID, she would have been doing these Zoom calls and other calls as a way of staying in touch with people on the front line.
But when she came on the throne, you had the Gutenberg press, which had been developed 500 years.
Wow.
And we only had technology, the modern technology, in the early 70s, touching the 60s.
Yes.
So, and now Queen is Zooming and doing WhatsApp and all those things. And within...
She moved to the times.
She changed the latter part of the 20th century, and stabilize the 21st century.
Even to have navigated COVID, because I mean, if you think this is someone who endured the war, and then found the entire world isolated, covering in our homes, and she would have been quite vulnerable, particularly before we would have had any vaccines. And she still managed to create that outreach and to be visible to the world. We talk so much now about leadership principles, and we talk about, leaders must be visible. Tell me, in your view, how she really embodied that visible leadership.
She was, to begin with, she was patron of all of these organizations, but she wasn't just a figurehead. She was there. She went to their events. She participated in their events. She, all of the whether it was a school or a hospital or a old people's home, it didn't matter. She went there. She touched hands with those people. She stayed in touch with all of them. Yes. And that is, we have a tendency for politicians to distance themselves from the people once they get the vote. She didn't. She was. No, I'm serious. She was out there. She had her garden parties. She walked the streets. She shook hands with people. She rode her horse in Balmoral. Yeah. She went down to the butcher and got her own slice of beef.
Yes.
That's one of the stories that's being told about her now, how she went there to get her own special cut of beef. She went to the people. She lived in Balmoral like you would live in your neighborhood. Yes. Everybody knew her. She drove her own car.
I've heard more than one prime minister recount their time with the Queen and her at the wheel, driving them, and just she seemed to be, particularly in that setting. She really enjoyed nature. It seems she
enjoyed the outdoors.
Yes.
She really did. And one of the photographs we have of her in the center is of her driving her grandchildren. And the look on her face, you can tell the grandchildren are talking in the back, and you think to yourself, oh, yes, you really want to tell them to be quiet.
When she when Princess Diana died,
yes,
and she got her grandchildren, they took her to McDonald's and all those places that she would not have gone.
Yeah.
So I believe the whole change in her life came too when she had a lot of supervision, and use that word loosely, over William and Harry. You remember she had a lot to do with them after their mother died. So they too changed her mindset to a point, because she went to McDonald's, she went all the places, and you see Queenie sitting down eating a hamburger. You would never see that all the time. But I saw an interview this morning, and the guy was saying Queenie liked to disguise herself. She would put on her
tie,
her scarf and her dark glasses and her boots, and she would walk all over the place, and everybody thinks she's an ordinary lady until they talk to her, and which is good. And she was an ordinary lady who did extraordinary things.
Right.
That's what she was.
Well,
she was not like Margaret. Margaret was very
Margaret is the party girl.
Yeah.
One of the things that one of the facts about her life is that I mentioned that she went to church every Sunday, no matter where she was.
Right.
But one of the stories about her is that she never walked in the front door. She went through the side door. She would go in the side door of those chapels and take her seat, very plainly dressed, very unobtrusive. People just accepted that she was going to do that, and when she would leave when the service was over, without attracting attention to herself, because she didn't want to take away from the value of the service, the spiritual value of the service.
One of the things I liked about the Queen is the relationship she had with Scotland.
Yes,
and she went to a Presbyterian church.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, she also went to a Presbyterian church and an Anglican church, because the Presbyterian has what we call a moderator, and Anglican church would have an archbishop or something like that.
To see what the Parliament there did for her.
And yes, but Queenie had a great sense of humor, even in death. She wanted to die at Balmoral. She knew the effect it would have. And that's great too. Even when she was going to her maker, she was trying to carve a better life, a peaceful life, a more connected life for the people of Great Britain.
And to see the way she was received in Scotland, I mean, they were referring to her still as the Queen of the Scots. The way that she was embraced, and to think that 2 days before her death, you talk about service. 2 days before her death, she was able to meet with her 15th Prime Minister, again ensuring that smooth transition.
Yeah, she accepted Boris Johnson's resignation and put Liz Truss in place. But, she was supposed to swear in the cabinet. She was supposed to meet the cabinet the next day. And the doctors said that she wasn't strong enough to do it. And, of course, she was on her way out then. People didn't know it. But what I most, and I said this when I did my talk during the Diamond Jubilee, and I spoke at the Chapel Church of God. She was a family woman. She was very protective of her family, and at that particular time she was having some difficulty, and all of us have difficulty, and let's don't pretend that ours is better than anybody else. They all have, except hers was in the limelight with the spotlighted, every camera in the world focused on them. And if they wore the wrong color dress, that was a big story for some headline maker. But she was very protective of her family. But when I thought to myself about it, had she was the queen, and everybody says, well, she can't control her children, she's the queen. But the fact of the matter is, if Philip had been king, they would have said the same thing, because she was, as Charles says, my mama.
Very interesting, very interesting.
And that's what people would have said.
Yes.
It didn't matter that she was queen. It was the fact that she was the mother, and everybody just assumed that she was queen, she would have a better control. But,
But notwithstanding, she was the greatest leader in the world.
Oh, that's
And I'll tell you something. We will sit on the shoulders of Her Majesty, that is women.
Yes.
Because she's already paved the way of how women make great leaders.
So tell me about that.
Yes, of course. She was subtle, but she was strong, and she wanted to know everything, and she read well. She wasn't political, but she was smart to be political. She would get what she wanted, but she would know the language to use. And I mean, as I said, as a young girl growing up in Cayman, and as I got older, there are things that I know a lot of the Caymanian professionals really took off Her Majesty. For example, she's a trendsetter of hats.
Yes.
She don't wear what I think named fashionista or whatever.
Fascinators.
Fascinator. She don't wear them.
Right.
But she must have had 1,000 hats. It would be interesting to know.
And she never blended in.
No. She wasn't a fashion icon, but she changed styles. That's what she did. She put on, and she wore high colors. We wouldn't wear high colors. Right. She wore them.
What do you think that what was her example in terms of the way that she wielded power? Because there's a lot said about her being, a figurehead, a ceremonial head of state. But she had quite the influence.
She was born into an age of men.
Yeah.
When men,
because the last woman monarch would have.
She was the women. Not only women were
Queen Victoria. She would have been dead 25 years before Queen Elizabeth was born.
She did for years. She wasn't popular.
Yes.
But she was, to me, she set the standard for women. Somebody asked me once. In fact, that was one of the first messages I did after I became speaker. How do you exist in a man's world?
Right.
And I said, who said it's a man's world? Did you abdicate your place?
Wow.
But, that I admired about her. She didn't abdicate her place in that man's world. The British are very old boy, old country, old club. Well, the Americans are the same way, despite the fact that they like to pretend they're not.
Right.
They don't really like women in places higher than them.
So leadership, and especially political leadership, has been very male-centric.
Oh, yes, But one of the things that came out, one of the strongest, most vociferous, most voluble prime ministers was the one she inherited, Winston Churchill.
Who would have been such a strong icon at the time.
And he thought, this little girl, 25 years old, she has no experience.
Right.
She's out in Africa. She's now queen. She's going to come home here. How is she going to hold that role? He found out real fast.
That's right.
He found out real fast that she was small, but she knew how to stand and stay standing.
But remember now that she changed the whole question of gender. Who could inherit the She changed it a little bit late, because I think that she should have done something for Princess Royal, but that's my own personal feeling. But and maybe we might see a change. I don't know what her will was like, but she made certain now that the women that coming up that are born from that lineage will have prominence. So that is something that she's changed for. That was in there for centuries. Except she was lucky because he only had 2 girls.
Yes.
But one must always remember that the King George, spent a lot of time with Elizabeth, with the Queen. He you remember she was homeschooled. A lot homeschooled. She didn't really go to a school as such. Mm-hmm. She was homeschooled by tutors coming in, and he really carved out her knowledge base, what he wanted her to drive at. If you really study King George, what he did with his daughter, he was trying with Margaret too, but Margaret was a traveler. She liked to move around and stuff. She didn't really like that.
The thing with this, and everybody, I think or people might forget this. She was never intended to be queen.
Right.
Her uncle abdicated, which put her father in the position and put her to fill in. Up until that time, we have a picture of her leaning out of the palace window after her father was made king, with her doll in her hand. She was just a little girl at that time. And, the idea that she was going to be queen, and particularly so quickly.
Yes.
Because she was
abdication
10 at the time, 15 years later.
Yes.
She's king. She's queen.
And the example that what she would have witnessed in terms of the toll that being king had on her father. So this would have been her very recent experience about what that would be to wear the crown.
You must remember that she had a very strategic mother.
Yes.
Don't leave out Queen Elizabeth, whatever.
The Queen Mother.
The Queen's mother.
Yes.
Don't leave her out of this whole business of where the Queen is,
Oh, no, she started training her very early.
And that homeschooling. Yes. And remember, the Queen was Scottish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Queen's mother was a Scottish woman.
Yes.
So her way of thinking could have been a little different too. And she might have had all of these ideas all the time that my daughter is going to become queen one day. So they were preparing her. Look at the Queen was smart, because the people that they got to tutor her were not ordinary lecturers and stuff. It was hard subjects that she was taking. It wasn't easy.
What part do you think her faith? You've made much mention of the fact that she regularly attended church on Sundays. Mm-hmm. What role do you think her faith had in the wisdom that we've come to associate with the late Her Majesty?
If I just say this, if you are head of a church,
yeah,
you got to go, even if you got to pretend.
Yeah.
If you're head of a church, you can't just stand up there and be static. You got to be part of it. But her life, when you saw how she moved with people, you could see she was a warm, really Christian woman, and how she would speak. Mm-hmm. And also, I think that Churchill, despite the fact that she was young with him, he made her think in a very adult way.
Well, she seemed to be also very disciplined.
And she was
a very disciplined person.
She liked him because when he got sick and went to the hospital, she went and visited him.
They became quite close.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, once he realized that she was not going to be a pushover. this little tiny woman was a firebrand. That she was not going to be a pushover. As prime minister, she had a meeting with her prime ministers every week, and nobody knows what those meetings were about. But when they all came, when whatever was going on, when they came out of that meeting, people knew that she had an influence somewhere along the road. But talking about her faith, this is one of the books that I like about her, The Servant Queen and the King She Serves. And it says, what is the secret of the Queen's remarkable consistency of character and extraordinary contribution to nation, Commonwealth, and the global community? It's a question she herself answered in 2002, and I'm quoting her now. I know just how much I rely on my faith to guide me through the good times and the bad. Each day is a new beginning. I know that the only way to live my life is to try to do what is right, to take the long view, to give up my best in all that the day brings, and to put my trust in God. I draw strength from the message of hope in the Christian gospel.
Well, I have to say that her faith was a very central theme, even of the funeral services that we've watched today, and that
scripture readings.
And the scripture readings, and it also changed the tone. I mean, when we've looked at some of the ceremonial funerals that have been held, they've been very sad. It was tragedy that triggered this death, but she lived a full life to the end, and her faith was so ever present that the tone of the service was very upbeat. I mean, it was, it was strange in a way.
She actually picked the hymn the music that she wanted.
She was very involved.
Yes.
She was very involved.
She plotted that whole little course like she had done a lot of other things in her time.
But it was such an upbeat service, and the way that you saw the community come together, the hours and hours that people stood online, and that when there was any sight of her, there were times when, even though this was a sad occasion and a procession, you could hear cheers coming out from the crowd because people were still so exuberant about seeing her.
If I take the liberty to say what I'm going to say, and I'm forgiven, I know my Bible, and I've read especially the New Testament, and I know that when Jesus was on earth, the crowds that followed him. And for a long time, I've thought of Queenie, and I've been on earth a long time, that you never hear anything in a blemish, well, except for children, and the way she is. And the evidence we had was over the last 10 days.
Yes.
That here is this holy woman.
Yes.
Walking this earth. And the only other person that did that was Jesus himself. Now you all can crucify me for what I've just said, but this is me, how I conceptualize it.
I've heard many say that it was remarkable how she lived her life in the limelight. Every move so closely watched, and yet few can say a bad word about her. Just that standard that she held herself to. Now, looking at this transition, because as you said, everything has been so well planned. To think that within 11 days we had the type of state a function event that we had today. I mean, it was a very elaborate, beautiful,
well
orchestrated, and to have all of the military on display. We've just had a new. They just got a new commissioner of police, as it were, there, and so he had very short time. He had just been newly appointed. But you had a sense that everything was so orderly. You had all of these heads of state that were flying in, major security issues, and everything ran like clockwork.
She had time.
She did have time.
She had time and experience. Who else would remember King George's funeral but her? She wrote everything. I'm positive of it. That she sat down there and put it in order.
All of the protocols and stuff.
She even knew where she was going to die.
Yes.
And
it certainly felt that way, didn't it?
Don't tell me it was just by accident. I think it was well orchestrated.
So as we talk about this transition, how do you think she would have felt looking down at, the family gathering and the way that the king, our now King George III, has King Charles III. Sorry, going back in time. King Charles III has stepped up into that role, and the way that Prince William and even her other grandchildren that have gathered, and the way the families come together, the Princess Royal, everyone really coming together at this moment, and the nation united, and the world with their eyes upon England, and that transition. How do you think she would have felt about how these last, week and more have gone, and in particular today?
Oh, I thought she'd been very pleased.
She said the same thing Ananias said. Remember when he said, "Now that I've seen something," Ananias, I think, when he had this baby, I think it was. Yes, she would have said the same thing. Now that I've seen, I can go, I can die.
Yeah.
But the people never wanted Queenie to die. As a matter of fact, I always tell people that if Queenie never died, she couldn't retire.
Somebody asked King Charles one day, how did he feel about not being, getting an opportunity to get on the throne? He said, but to do that, my mother would have to die.
Yes.
And to him, that was not a question, that was not an option as far as he was concerned. But, I admire King Charles for over the years when the rest of the world were scoffing at him and making fun of him because he was talking about climate change, and he was talking about agriculture, and he was talking about preserving your history and all the architecture in London that everybody wanted to move that out.
Everything was going very modern.
Everything, they, like us here, concrete and glass is replacing all our little bits and pieces. And he was spoken, he was very voluble in his speeches about those things. And he promoted a lot of the
fun, the environment,
all the marine life and everything else. He promoted all of that.
Yes.
He pushed all of that. But people thought he was being, where did he get those ideas from? They were scoffing at him for it.
He was so ahead of his time.
That's right. And now I am looking forward to his role in what we're not at a place now where we have time to plot and plan. We had better have a plan.
Yes.
And we had better know where we're going now. And I think he's going to have a great influence on that, not just in England, but I hope on us here in Cayman, where we're giving up everything we owned.
So if King Charles III, His Majesty, were listening in, and with all that you've reflected upon the remarkable life and the role model that his mother was, what would your words of advice be? What would your words of encouragement be?
I would say to him, from the Bible, I can't remember exactly where in the Bible, but I think it could be a Proverbs that says, follow the instructions of your father and listen to the teachings of your mother. If he listened to the teachings of his mother, he can walk in her shadow. He doesn't have to deviate at all, because she has been the glue that have made us better in this world. And that's all he has to do, and just keep himself cool. And follow the line, especially in Cayman, with the climate change, because, he did come here and set up a fund. I think a fund, the Blue Fund or something like that. Fund. And that is good for us. We should really go and start thinking about that again. But I'm like Miss Mary. I'm a forgiving person, and especially when people seek forgiveness. Yes, he's been a human. Perhaps Queenie was not a human. Perhaps she was a godly person on earth. Don't kill me for that, Miss Mary. We do have angels on earth, and don't kill me for it. We should be glad that that person is part of the Cayman Islands.
Yes,
and we should be looking to her and saying, especially us as women, let's be graceful. Let's take our time and do things. Let's be good leaders. Let's try when we have a job. Let's be the perfect public servant like Queenie. Let's be the perfect employee. You know, like what Queen is. I mean, Queen could never retire.
She never could.
Because she would have to die to retire.
Well, I've said before when I addressed people that I go by my Bible and I look through that and I don't see that word retired. I see people born, they worked, they lived, they worked, and then they died. They didn't. There's no such thing as retirement in the Bible. And I don't know why we expect, and that's where we lose so much in our Cayman community especially. We lose the people. We push them aside. That could be a stabilizing force in our community.
You two stay very much involved in your community, but whatever your role. But I don't want to lose.
But that's why Queen is a role model.
Yes,
96-year-old.
Yes,
and still riding a pony.
Yes, yes.
Come on.
Yes. What would your words of encouragement, advice be to His Majesty?
To His Majesty, be true to yourself. And the one that my mother drummed into me, to whom much is given, much is expected. There's going to be a lot expected to him, but if he follows the pattern and I'm not talking about what he's going to do, the pattern his mother set, and be true to himself first. If you can be true to yourself, you can't be false to any man.
Yes.
And I believe that is his, that will take him where he needs to go, and then we can all climb aboard.
Well, this has been a remarkable conversation, as I knew it would be, and we have talked about some provocative topics, but also really had an opportunity to reflect on the amazing life and example and of leadership, of grace, of hard work, of commitment, and really of abiding by her words. To think that she made an oath at 21 years old, my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service. And she was faithful to the end. And I believe that with those words that you have shared and the encouragement for His Majesty the King, that we are able to truly say that Her Majesty the late Queen left an amazing legacy, but staying true to himself and following her example, that he has and with faith in God and being true to himself and keeping in touch with his those that he is charged with leading. But also I think the point that you've said, that he has himself already made a huge imprint in places like the issues of climate change and the environment and history and conservation, and that these are areas that he can truly continue to make an imprint.
These are areas that are topical throughout the world right now.
And calling out for leadership, continued leadership. So I believe our time is coming to an end. But absolutely,
I would like to read a poem. The poem is the poem that she included in her mother's funeral.
Yes.
You can shed tears that she is gone, or you can smile because she has lived. You can close your eyes and pray that she will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that she has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see her, or you can be full of the love that you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday.
Wow.
You can remember her and only that she's gone, or you can cherish her memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back, or you can do what she would want, smile, open your eyes, love, and go on.
Thank you.
Miss Gloria, what I'd like to leave with us, because of the age I am, and because of one of my councils that I'm on, that what Queenie, I think, has left for older persons, that you can go on and you can do a lot. She was 96 years old.
Yes.
And when she was 96, she was riding a pony. But she had two fundamentals in her life. She liked animals, and she liked dogs, and she liked horses. And I believe by having those two things, it's difficult to teach animals to talk or to teach them to do anything. And if you have that kind of success, that you can change dogs and you can make Paddington Bear have tea with you, you got to live a longevity.
Yes.
And it comes on the heel of next month, which is Older Persons Month. And it make me feel good to see this older, noble person that the world loves. To see those young people, those children on their father and mother's head, to see this older person. This too is what we should do.
Yes.
With our older people.
Yes.
Honor them and remember them.
And I would just like in my final comments this afternoon as well to extend that challenge to those in public service, because we had with the Queen just a remarkable role model of someone who gave of herself and was in service her entire life. And we have seen these 11 days that we've been in official mourning. We've seen persons from across our wider public service coming in the floral honor guard that was established. And every hour on the hour while we were in official mourning, they came there with their teams and they remembered and they laid flowers. And I'm hoping that this is not just something that we will do and as a reflection of looking back, but it will serve as a reminder and encouragement to all of us about a life well served and lived and the service that we can give and the impact that we can have. Each one of us, ordinary persons doing extraordinary things. True. Thank you so much, both of you. It's been
thank you.
So remarkable
and
having
thank
this
you for
conversation.
Your tie. It was lovely.
When we celebrated the 500th anniversary of the Cayman Islands founding, we put up a granite wall in front of the courthouse with 500 names on it.
Yes.
And we were allowed in Bodden Town to pick 90. And when we were picking them, we picked the ordinary people. The women who had stayed and held the country together. The men who had lost parents and had to raise their younger children, younger siblings. These were the people who contributed to building Cayman. And
yes.
you build a nation. What we don't understand is a nation is not built by government. A nation is built by its people.
Absolutely. I'm reflecting in 1983.
There goes the politician.
I know that the Queen,
No,
the Queen's visit was remarkable in my wider family, and I had the booklet from her visit that my mother-in-law, yes, you have yours as well, Miss Carrie Nixon provided to me. But her mother, Miss Orrett Ebanks, would have received certificate and badge of honor from the Queen, an ordinary woman, a cook at the hospital, but who in every interaction made people feel seen and poured love into every meal that she prepared. We've just lost her son, Roger, and I know this is a difficult time for the family. But as we reflect on her life, again, the way that the Queen's visits were used to celebrate these ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And Miss Orma as well worked well into her older years. And my sister, who was much younger, but on the now King's visit, when he visited us just 3 years ago, a nurse and someone who, through hospice care, cares for those who are in the final stages of life and grief and families that need support, and just ordinary people. And just in my family, and we are not... there's no access, there's no coming from that type of prominent families, but just to know that there are these degrees of connection with the royal family that ordinary people have because of the way that they made a point of celebrating and honoring and acknowledging those of service wherever they came from within the community. I think that is still something that has made an imprint on our family, and I think there's so many families that can share similar stories.
Oh, yes.
Ms. Clark, I know we're finished, but can I add that we commission writers be they in civil service like archives and those people, along with individuals like Miss Mary, to put together the Cayman perspective of Queenie.
Yes.
Not something from there, but how we see this noble woman.
I think that is an excellent thing, and I know we talked about also a proper monument, and we are over our time. We've been so engrossed in this conversation that I know we need to wrap it up. But I think there is so much. We've only just touched the surface of what we could say.
Yes, you see all this stuff.
We've only just begun to touch the surface, but I hope that it won't stop here. I hope that there will be more conversations. They will be recorded, and we will document the ties between these beloved Cayman Islands and that of Her Majesty, and now as well His Majesty King Charles III and the monarchy, because
we have a tie with him.
We do already.
With that, us to put up the blue-green flag.
I'm glad he came here.
Yes.
Because now people know who he is.
Yes. Yes, and to a new generation.
He's not a nebulous figure that they have not seen. They know who he is.
Absolutely.
And
so I know we are out of time, but I just want to say again from the bottom of my heart, to the Honorable Mary Lawrence and to Miss Lucille Seymour, thank you both ladies for your time, your knowledge, your passion, your memories. It has been a true pleasure to share the afternoon with you in reflection on the life and impact of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and the ascent of King Charles III. We now bid goodbye to an era, and we look forward to the reign of King Charles III.
God save the king.
Long live the king. God save the king.
Radio Cayman,
The voice,
the heart, the soul